welcome to a very special bonus episode of Into the Aether. It's a low-key video game podcast, and my name is Brendan Bigley.
I'm Stephen Hilger.
And joining us today, we have a special guest. He's the editor-in-chief and co-founder of Polygon.com, editor on Quest, an incredible RPG, tabletop RPG that you can go pick up, co-host on the Besties, which is a Spotify exclusive, and the creator of Postgame, which is a newsletter on Substack, which I'm a very big fan of. It's Chris Plante.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's me, the person who does too much game stuff. I guess that summarizes it. Sure.
So thrilled to have you on the show. I mean, we are both big fans of all of your work. Even our editor, AJ, hello AJ, is I think the one of the mods on the Quest Discord. We're deeply embedded. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, AJ. I appreciate you.
We also, this show would not exist without AJ's very hard work.
Thank you, AJ.
Especially considering what we have planned for this episode, which we didn't even tell you about, but we'll talk about during a break.
No. I'm really sorry, AJ.
Well, here's the thing, Chris. you were very, very kind to us, and we are on a list. I think it's called Eat Sleep Game. It's a playlist of podcast episodes on Spotify.com, and the episode that we have in there is Everybody's a Ghost, which is our Kentucky Route Zero breakdown, which does end with 50 minutes of highway sounds. So, I mean, we're just trying to bring that energy today, I think, as well.
I was just really trying to boost your minutes played, you know?
So today we are talking about two games. The original pitch was maybe Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, but you said, how about something that's not that, and then gave us a list of things. Two games of which are Spelunky and Nier Automata.
Automata.
Yes.
Yes, not Automata. Because that is the correct, that's how you pronounce the actual word. Yeah. But Automata is how it's pronounced in the game.
In the game, you know, yes.
That's how the game's going to say it. That's how you should, that's it.
I've been wrong this whole time. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. You just got to correct yourself and do it like this from now on.
Yeah.
And as long as you don't go on Twitter and let me know, me, a person who literally my only job is talking about this game, know that I am wrong. Otherwise, you're fine. Cool. You can be wrong. Cool. In peace. That's okay.
So these two games are just like, it's wild that you picked these two games. I would say I mean, we were just talking about our games of the decade, our like top 5 games of the decade that we came down on. Spelunky is on that list. It is like easily one of my favorite games of all time. I have played it more hours than I can count at this point across every device possible that was released on, from Vita to Xbox 360 to PS4, the whole gamut. And Nier Automata, we talked about, Stephen and I, a long time ago, after I had finished the A route, which we'll get to way later. And then you picked it up and started playing it, and I think we talked about it for like 4 straight episodes, and then again in the games of the decade. Yeah.
It kind of came off like I had a series of bad dreams and was just like gushing to you about it. You're like, okay, that's nice. So let's talk about anything else, Steven. Please.
Yeah, these two games mean a lot to us personally, so really excited to talk about them. And we wanted to start with Spelunky because that one does not involve 26 different routes, and although maybe it kind of involves infinite routes, but we can talk about it.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
So on your end, Chris, where did you pick up Spelunky? Was it with Classic? Was it with HD? Like, what is your history with this game and roguelikes in general? And like, where do you land on this?
Yeah, I picked up Spelunky with Classic, the freeware game, just because it was one of those games that everybody talked about when you would go to the game developers conference. It was like the game developers game, you know, everybody, I mean, I think it started with Tim at Double Fine. He was a huge fan of it, and then when, you know, your boss is a fan of something, everybody else plays it, so then everybody at Double Fine played it. And then I got word from that of like, okay, you have to play this game, Spelunky. It's just amazing, and it's free. And at that time I had no dollars. So I was like, that's a great price for a video game.
Yeah.
I love it. And I played it and I was like, well, this is horrible. Why would anybody like this? It looks like garbage. It's completely unforgiving. And it seems like totally predictable. Like it's barely even designed. So I threw it away. No, but then I worked with my pal, Russ Freshtick, who works at Polygon now. Both of us worked at this just ill-begotten website called UGO way back in the day. And he is one of those people who, once he starts thinking, is just going to just complete it just to prove that he did, especially if it's challenging.
Yeah.
And he pulled me back and was like, no, you actually have to like give this more than 5 minutes of your attention. You just stubborn, impatient human. And I dove back in and I was like, yeah, actually, there's a lot going on here. It is effectively a perfect little clock. And it's so rare to find a game, especially at that point where everything had shifted towards, like brown AAA games that didn't do much other than push you forward, to have something where everything influenced everything else and you had creative freedom and agency. So that was that. And then both of us were working at Polygon years later, and Spelunky HD came out. And both of us got code, and I had the opportunity to review it, which was a real pleasure. It's the only 10 out of 10 that I think you should actually have a score on, and I stand by that.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Frushtick was the first person to beat the game, so he has that forever on his achievements, and he holds it over me.
Like ever?
Ever. Well, like ever on Xbox, if you go on like the Xbox achievement whatever website, he's the person who unlocked like beating the game.
Whoa! We're saying beating as in like make it through hell, or make it through the temple?
Making it through like the core run. Okay, which is I guess something. I don't know how much we have to talk about like all the intricacies, because I imagine people who listen to your show like are pretty familiar with them being lots of hidden runs.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah. It is probably worth touching on very, very quickly. Spelunky roguelike game, 4 main worlds you have to make it through, but there are just a ton of secrets and a lot of other things and a lot of ways that you technically can beat the game that don't include going through those four main places.
Yeah. And then you asked about roguelikes. Yeah, I like. It's weird. I'm not good at video games. Like spoilers. I've never actually beaten a Dark Souls game. I get about like 60 to 70% of the way through, and I'm like, yeah, I know what it is.
I get that.
And then I move on, which is probably a curse of the job. But with roguelikes, I prefer things like Spelunky, where I feel validated by my investment in time, because I can see my skill getting better rather than numbers getting better. I really kind of struggle with number reward systems or XP systems in games. It feels so artificial to me, and especially when I can see it. I know that's very trendy, or was trendy for a while, but it just makes me feel a little empty. So I enjoy things like Rogue Legacy, and I've been playing Rogue Legacy 2. It's perfectly fun, but at the same time, I always feel like, well, am I good, or am I like just grinding to unlock the thing that's going to make me powerful enough to keep moving through this game?
Yeah, from what I've heard of Rogue Legacy 2, it is a lot more of Rogue Legacy 1. And that game, as much as I extremely, extremely loved Rogue Legacy 1, I did find that, at least on my first playthrough, I just had like the kind of power fantasy thing where I thought that I was getting better, and it turns out it was the stats. And then upon repeated playthroughs, as they kept releasing it on other platforms, which I should maybe just stop buying roguelikes on every single platform they get released on. But as I continued buying and playing all of Rogue Legacy over and over and over again.
One day I'll get better at this thing. Yeah.
it just really occurred to me that that's what that game was all about. Yeah, I don't. Do you have any more roguelikes that you are like a huge fan of?
I mean, I really like mobile game roguelikes. Like, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. I feel terrible. Michael Brow or Braug?
Oh, yeah.
868 Hack. But yeah, all his games are incredible, and I tend to feel that way just about roguelikes on, or I guess closer to Rogue format on mobile. Like that's really my sweet spot. In those games where it's like you take a move and everything else moves. What is it? Shin and the Wanderer? Is that it?
Is that the
blanking on a Sega game?
Apple Arcade Sega game? Is that one?
Maybe. Wait a second. I'm Mystery Dungeon is what it's called. It's called Shiren the Wanderer. And it's the Mystery Dungeon series, but it is great. That's it. I wish I had more. There's going to be more thought, and I was just like, no, this is good. It's just a really good game that has been released on like every video game system ever.
Oh.
I
should probably play that.
They're great. I think it's actually tied to the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games. Are technically part of the same series. So Shiren the Wanderer and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, I think, are part of the same Mystery Dungeon metaverse.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like canonically or just like as a series?
I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna have to throw the Wikipedia page on this one. Like my old pal Wiki.
I'm only asking because I've only played the demo of the new Pokemon Dungeon, and it begins with the backstory that you were a human that has turned into a Pokemon, which like immediately kind of threw me off. So I'm wondering if that's the connection somehow, or like that's how they justify Pokemon.
I'm wondering if this is like what is that 90s sitcom that ended with, or the 80s sitcom that ended with the kid in the hospital waking up and he had dreamed the entire sitcom?
It's the hospital show. Oh my God, what is it?
Yeah, it's like all in that kid's brain, like all of television is inside of it.
Yes.
I just pulled up the wiki. There is Dragon Quest, Shiren the Wanderer, Druaga, Pokemon, and an Etrian mystery dungeon game, all part of the same series, which begins with none of them. It begins with a game called Tamiko's Great Adventure.
Oh my God.
So, welcome to video games.
I do feel like we just unlocked something. We
Yeah.
just waltzed directly into the Aether and pulled out something cursed that we're not allowed to look at straight on.
I can't believe that we haven't even gotten into like Nier lore yet, and we've already lost message.
I was gonna say that the connecting tissue here to me is this idea of like a never-ending story, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, the show was Saint Elsewhere. I just had to look it up. And
Oh, yes,
now
it
it's
was Saint Elsewhere,
confirmed.
yes.
Saint Elsewhere.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Amazing.
so roguelikes on my end, just to fly through it, because I've talked about it a lot on this show, but I'll fly through it. When I was in high school, like senior year of high school, I was playing the first release, like the first, like very first release of The Binding of Isaac, like a lot. And that was like my big podcast game, was just like listening to podcasts, playing Binding of Isaac. Like once, I didn't even know what a roguelike was really at that point. I just knew that I liked Binding of Isaac a whole lot. And I the infinite replayability idea was just really exciting to me. And then over time, learning more and more about what that genre is, and what's a roguelike and what's a roguelite and all that stuff, which I think it's kind of, you could go on forever about what those words mean, but I think they're kind of all becoming homogenous at a certain point, maybe.
Yeah.
But anyway, I got really, really into Rogue Legacy and Spelunky, essentially. And since then, just like every roguelike that kind of is of note, I will check out kind of without any hesitation. I will just dive fully into it and just see what's up. So like, I would say maybe Dead Cells is the most recent one that I got extremely into. But yeah, I don't know. Spelunky was kind of like the like Rosetta Stone for me for roguelikes as a genre.
People who are listening can't see this, but you have your palm on your forehead, brushing through your hair like you have been transported back to a time and a place that contains memories and feelings beyond mere words. Yeah,
the idea of talking about Spelunky to me is like literally charting a course through my life from the moment it came out on Xbox 360 and onward. I even like right here. Actually, I'm in the middle of moving, so it's going to be harder for me to just grab than usual. But I have a Vita like right here that has Spelunky on it, and it's like charged and ready to go. Like I played just so much Spelunky, and it got to the point where like I was doing the daily challenge constantly. I was watching speedruns and like trying to learn how to get even better beyond just playing the game, which is like when you're way too far down the rabbit hole.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and then had to like just pull up on the joystick and bail out of that experience. So I put Spelunky down for a really long time and then revisited it again for this episode over the past couple weeks, which has been a really wild scenario to realize fully and completely that all of my skill had gone out the window and I'm terrible at that game again, starting completely from scratch. Woof.
It's great.
Yeah.
So we also have a relative Spelunky novice.
Yes. Hello.
On the pod. Hello.
You might know me as a relative Spelunky novice. Yeah, so I have just started playing Spelunky, like, I guess the last few weeks. Just real quick, my history with roguelikes as well. I've always been a little bit more interested in roguelikes that try to incorporate this idea of like restarting into the narrative. So the first roguelike that I can remember that really landed for me was FTL, which was for those unfamiliar, it was a game where like, it was basically like a space flight D&D game where you manage like your crew and your resources, and like every time you jumped to a new part of the galaxy, it would be a random event. So like it wasn't really the same type of roguelike that Spelunky is, where like you're mechanically getting better, but it's more like, how did this experience experience play out. And FTL in particular gives you just enough, like it's a pretty minimalist lore. Like there's like, you know, the mantis aliens, there's like robot aliens, but they don't really tell you anything of like what's actually happening.
Yeah.
So like, I think that's purposeful because then I found myself filling in the blanks that like justified how that story went. So it didn't even matter if I won or lost. It just felt like a fresh experience. And of course, like you unlock more stuff, so there's more variety, but it was more about, I guess, the uncertainty and surprise of the moment than like, I'm better at FTL, if that makes sense.
And one day it eventually all just works out for the crew. And like that was just
one day I beat I beat the rebel ship somehow. I'm like, okay, cool. But another game, same developer, I think, was Into the Breach, which we talked about like early on in the show. But actually even more with that, they introduced the concept that like those characters are traveling back in time to like undo this kind of Evangelion threat of bugs.
Yes.
So yeah, but with Spelunky, I felt bad because like I think a lot of the show, Brendan, has been you and I like sharing our deepest loves with each other, and slowly but surely us kind of checking out that. So like we started the show with me coming in like as a huge RPG fan, and you as a big roguelike fan, and actually this episode kind of represents us checking out the other, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this is like us meeting in the middle very much.
But yeah,
so
anyway,
happy that I can mediate.
Yeah, this is the first episode where Steve and I haven't been screaming at the top of our lungs, arguing with one another. Finally, we put down our angry gamer podcast vibe.
Chris is the ref of this episode, just making sure, you know, we don't scream. But anyway, in terms of Spelunky, in addition to everything I'd heard about it, you messaged me like when I told you I got it. You said, I implore you to play past the point where you get frustrated, which it sounds like you eventually did, Chris, where like you had that initial like, what is this, you know? And it really does feel like pratfall the game the first time you pick it up, because it's like you're like, oh cool, I'm in a mine, I'm exploring, and then it darts like and you just fall into sleep. Like it's a pretty like Mario-esque game in design, like everything's kind of cute and cartoony, but the deaths are like very harrowing, especially the spikes. Like you like squiggle a bit as you like slowly fall. It's really disturbing.
Truly horrific. Yeah,
we'll probably talk more about that as we get into the, if you want to hear more about those gruesome deaths, we'll get into it. But
I do think that's a good point to touch on, though, because even the weirdly between when we decided we were going to do this episode and now they being Derek Yu has announced that Spelunky 2 is going to be coming out next month, which holy shit. Yeah. But anyway, the end of that trailer is like 45 seconds of one death playing out as the Spelunky guy just like ragdolls down the entirety of the caves. It's like even Derek Yu very much understands the appeal of this game, you know?
Yeah.
It's somewhere between like Looney Tunes and South Park.
Yes.
Anyway, South Park, I mean like the Kenny death sequences from the early days of South Park. Yeah.
Like they catch you off guard with like, and it's not like super gratuitous, but it's a little bit more than you expect. Like you said with Kenny, you know.
Oh yeah.
But I think what kind of adds levity is like there's a journal entry paired with the death that'll be like, I broke every bone in my body, and like you know, or like I was consumed. My favorite is with the vampire. It's I could feel my humanity being drained away by the vampire's bite. I'm like, give me that story. I want to see what happens next with that. Because, but anyway, I also had that experience even in my shorter time playing it over the course of like 2 or 3 weeks. And I want to say I have probably put in like 10 hours at this point. I think like the first 2 hours are just straight up like failure. And then you eventually, things get a little bit more second nature. I found that I had a firmer grasp on what was worth the risk, you know, because at first you just see these gems and you see like these enemies. And okay, is it worth exploring a little bit longer? I know now if I stay too long in this one floor, a ghost will show up. Do I want the ghost to show up to make the jewels more valuable? I didn't know that was a thing, but now I do because I've been playing for 10 hours. So like there's some stuff like that where there's a lot of organic discovery. And then as soon as you feel like you've gotten better, you get to the jungle, which I'm still in, and that's just the game being like, shut the fuck up, you suck, you idiot, you know. And like I really wanted for this episode to get past the jungle to like join the cool kids club of Spelunky pros, but I'm still very much in the jungle. And but even still, I find myself being like, okay, I know that this evil game is going to put a trap right by the door leading out to the next floor, so I'm going to time this. And I think that that's something that's really beautiful about this game is the fact that it has that, you know, you compared it to Dark Souls earlier, Chris, like that Dark Souls, like, I'm going to get better and learn. But I think what makes this a little bit more palatable than maybe Dark Souls would as a whole for a lot of people is the fact that you're instantly back. You don't have to wait through like the 20-minute item lore and going back to the area where you got your ass kicked. Like you just get right back into it. Kind of like Celeste almost, where you're just like, okay, I'm going to fall off a million times, but I know it's going to be like instantly back. I can instantly try again.
Well, the game is a stadium, right? Like
yeah.
That's what you're playing. You're playing the Spelunky Stadium, and you play it over and over again. Or like Dark Souls is like, oh, you're working your way through an adventure, and then when you have to restart, it's like, well, oh, I just lost progress in my adventure. Like it feels very different to me. Also, I just want to say I love what you said about I'm in the jungle. Like just as I got through this, I got to the jungle. It feels to me like somebody being like, I was looking at a rainbow, and just after I got to red, I got to orange, and that was too much. That's enough different colors. There's so much left.
Too much UV.
I know exactly what you mean. That's how I felt. One day, hopefully, you will reach the ice stage, and it will ruin your life because it's such a departure from that, and then you'll find out that is still, I guess, 3/8 of the entire game that you'll see.
Just about.
And most people will never even know that the entire half of the game even exists. Like, I don't know.
I've been in the process of I wanted to finish it for the episode, but I couldn't in time just because I'm moving and stuff. But I got about halfway through a reread of the Spelunky book by Derek Yu, where he just kind of talks at length about the making of the game. And on the back of the book, it even is like, in case you're wondering what it means to make a perfect video game, like, I guess this is what I did to accomplish that. And he talks at length for a while about the difficulty spike, specifically in that the mines are supposed to be difficult and the jungle is supposed to be like literally twice as hard as the mines were. You get to the ice level and it's actually technically a little bit easier. It's daunting as all hell because literally the floor is not under you anymore. They pull the floor out from under you, and some of the stuff that gets introduced just visually is very incongruous with what you've been experiencing before. You already thought that the jungle was shocking.
And on Vita, it runs at like 10 frames per second.
Yes.
So it's especially nice.
True. And then you get to the last one, which is probably as hard as the jungle, maybe if not more. So like it really is a daunting experience, but the difficulty curve is less of kind of a steep climb and more of kind of like a dip roller coaster situation. So I would say personally, of the four, I find the jungle to be the hardest at this point. The problem with making it to the temple, which is the last one over and over again, is that it's just very hard to get there. So it'll be harder to learn the ins and outs of the temple. But I feel like once you do, it becomes a little bit easier to get by.
And you're so overpowered by the time you get to the temple. Usually. It's like you have a jetpack, or you have a pickaxe, or you have so many bombs that it doesn't matter, and you just burrow to the end if you're really just determined to beat the game. But again, it incentivizes you eventually to think about not beating the game. Or not beating the game as you would expect to beat the game, I guess.
One thing that I appreciate is I've gotten to the point where I unlocked the character who can create shortcuts for you. So like now when I load a new save, I can either go into floor 1 of the mines, or I can go a little bit left and I can go straight to the jungle. What I quickly learned was that going straight into the jungle with no equipment, no money is ill-advised. So like even though, but I still appreciate the choice, because it's like, okay, do I want to start from scratch and really make this my best run to get as far as possible, in which case I'll start from floor 1 of the mines so I can get some resources and get some items and feel a little bit more equipped. Or if I just want to see more of the game, I don't have to go through the same thing again. I think it's a really nice option to have. But I was trying to just brute force to the ice cavern, like I said, and I was like, I need more money, because I discovered the black market, and I was like, this all looks dope. I can't buy anything. I'm just gonna kill a scorpion and get out of here. So
no, you're my favorite. I mean, you're just having the experience that I crave, and why I'm so looking forward to Spelunky 2. Because a thing that I discovered through Spelunky that I love about video games, and specifically Spelunky, is the opportunity to learn a new language. Like that's really what happens when you play Spelunky. That is what the game is. Spelunky is a visual language, a language without words, and you have to learn how to read it. And over time, the more you play, you have to learn how to read it very quickly. And when I say a language, I mean things like, if you see that very fundamental, a little, I guess it's like a dragon statue face, it will spit an arrow if you pass in front of it, or if you see a plant with a mouth that will eat you if you land on it, or if you take this statue, it will release a giant boulder that will destroy most of the environment. Discovering how effectively the game works, how the language of it works, and learning how to navigate it very, 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 very quickly. Because that's what will happen after you played forever. Have that muscle memory, and you can see the Matrix, I guess. You can blast through that first set of stages in like a second. I mean, it is wild how fast you can blast through that game. And that's really the pleasure for me, and why, it's sadly... The game is wonderful, and I still play it like an addict, but you can never get that part back. Each thing you learn is a new thing taken from you in a weird way.
Oh, God.
It's terrible when you put it like that. But that's also why I think Spelunky is probably the best game ever. Because what, Derek, you did with it was adding all these other things, all of the hidden levels, all of the new things to discover, knowing, I assume, on some level, that is why people enjoy it, that they like that discovering all these new languages within the game, and knowing that people will want to find that out as time goes on. I mean, it's wild that and I think in a lot of ways, kind of accidentally or maybe intentionally predicted the world that we live in now, where games just get updated, like Fortnite, where it's like, you like this, and now here's this twist that's just tucked away in this corner. In a weird way, he made a game that like just naturally people discovered all of those things, which is a choice. Like, that's bold. When he made Spelunky HD, posting stuff on YouTube and Twitch wasn't super common just yet. So assuming that people would work together to figure out the eggplant run, which is a real thing. Read about it on Polygon.com. There it is. There's a plug. Boo, boo, boo. Yeah, I just think that, like, wow, that takes guts. Like, he's a designer. Totally. It's a lot of work for potentially zero reward.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Yeah, the rereading the book, I mean, the first couple chapters are specifically just like idea generation and where this game came from. And after he had finished his previous game, like what he was kind of up to and noodling around trying to figure out some other stuff. And he was like really sure that he wanted to do some rogue stuff, or some roguelike stuff, I guess I should say. But he was also extremely into the idea of making a platformer, and at one point had like a really solid, like kind of rogue idea with some great level generation stuff, and he had a really solid platformer, and then eventually was like, oh, why don't these two things just get put together, I guess, and like kind of happened upon the thing, which is when you eventually get to I think Game Maker's Toolkit just put out a great video on this like this week, and if that's true, I'll link it in the show notes. But I've watched a lot of video essays recently, but it's about the game designing itself, essentially. It's about, like, at a certain point the game started telling him what it needed next, and the biggest thing in that, or the biggest hurdle to get over there, was the idea that the player characters, all of the items and all of the enemies needed to be coded as one thing. Instead of those three things being separate in the code and all of them behaving differently, all of those things have to behave exactly the same, which is why you can pick up an enemy when it's dead and throw it in front of the dragon arrow shooting thing, and that'll set off the trap. That's why when you throw a bomb or a rope in front of the dragon shooting thing, it'll set off the trap as well. And that, I think, is where like really some of the brilliance comes in, and that's why you see this game rippling out into so many others, right? Like Binding of Isaac is a game that I already referenced, but like one of the best things about that game, and the thing that got me sucked into it, was the idea that every item I was picking up in Binding of Isaac could interact with every other item in like a totally unexpected way, and there are hundreds of items in that game, which is why every run is like completely bananas. And weirdly enough, Spelunky taking all of that and distilling that down into like the 20 items that are there also is equally thrilling, because the way they interact is so wild and so interesting, that it really does make every run feel, you feel like you could do anything for about 45 seconds, you know? You know, when you get the jetpack, it's like, oh my god, finally I'm gonna be able to beat this thing. And then when you don't, but you make it further than you've ever gotten before, that's like one of those runs that will stick in the front of your fucking head forever, you know? And that is the thing that I think is like so brilliant about this game, and I think that's why it's been rippling out forever, and people constantly refer to Spelunky as a huge source of inspiration. I mean, Chris, you reviewed the game at Polygon, gave it a 10 out of 10 when you still had scores there, which, thank you for getting rid of scores.
Terrible time.
No, thank you for getting rid of scores. But anyway,
I do what I can.
You gave it a 10 out of 10. I'm just wondering, like, having reviewed that game when it dropped, and now being editor-in-chief of a big video game website and seeing and playing and hearing a ton of stuff, like how much of Spelunky are you seeing in stuff that's still coming out these days? I imagine it's a lot, but just out of curiosity.
Honestly, not as much as I would think. I feel like I saw a ton for a while, right? Like there was like the indie roguelike boom, and now I think of that boom as like shooters. Like I don't know how many shooters that are trying to, I don't mean this, I sound like I'm being rude, but like they have like a Quake aesthetic and they have a roguelike energy, and they're playing with those things. It just feels like that became a thing for a moment. I mean, they're not bad, they're actually quite good, but that seems to have been where a lot of that energy went. And now I guess we're entering the like generational divide phase, where now we're getting Rogue Legacy 2, now we're getting Spelunky 2. We got Into the Breach from the FTL squad. Like we're starting to see kind of the originals of this space coming up with whatever they have next. So I see that. I don't see a lot of it in, I guess, the mainstream. The thing that I would reference, which just rules, and nobody else likes, because a lot of people have bad taste.
It is true.
Which is like, fine, like cool, good for them. That's fine. But Prey Moon Crash, did you play this?
I didn't play. I am making my way through Prey at the moment. I had to box up my Xbox One, but yeah. Oh no. I know about. Well, no, I'm just moving, so it has to go somewhere else. But
let's die now.
I'm gonna
Good night.
shoot an arrow at it, and it's gonna light on fire as it goes down the river. Anyway. Moon Crash is a roguelike built into Prey, correct?
So they released this DLC that is effectively like BioShock / Prey meets roguelike, and it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I can't believe how good it is and how brilliant it is. And you can unlock it does do the thing which I normally don't like. You can unlock different classes, and you can kind of like upgrade tree them. But it's just wild. It's playing with the ideas of a big, glossy AAA narrative game with a roguelike format. Yeah. And I don't know how they got the budget for it. I don't know how it happened. They're out of Austin, and I definitely have never met anybody there. But I think anybody who happens to work there, off of my gut, had like a hell of a time making it. And it just sounds like it was one of those things where maybe Bethesda was looking the other way, their publisher. Yeah. And they just got to make something amazing. And like, that just doesn't seem to happen a lot in the industry.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm obsessed with it. If you ask me, like, what are the games of this generation that I think are important, it would easily be in my like top 10, top 5, maybe. Yeah. Just because it defies logic. It's a rare taste of a universe we're never going to get, which is really sad, but also kind of beautiful that it existed at all. That for a very short moment, these people who are making immersive sims, who God knows if we'll ever see an immersive sim again after Dishonored 2 sales and Prey sales, had the opportunity to just make something, and they took this formula that had become so popular in indie games, and they gave it the big budget experience. So I strongly recommend, if people are looking for something that you will never, ever, 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 ever get again from AAA games, to check this out. The great thing is you can get it for like $4 usually, because Prey is just perpetually on sale.
Yeah, until very recently it was on Game Pass, which is where I had to stop my playthrough short so I could then buy it again and continue my playthrough when they removed it from Game Pass, which is a thing that does happen. We talk about Game Pass a lot on this show. We never talk about the games that leave Game Pass, which is a bummer. But anyway, Prey rips that opening in that game. Steven, one day you're gonna have to play at least the opening of Prey, just so we can talk about it. Because
I will.
Another plug, No Clip on YouTube. Have you recommended this already?
I've watched it before, but yeah.
Okay, so No Clip on YouTube, great documentary YouTube channel. They just made a video on effectively how the opening of Prey was created. And people should watch it. It's so good. Yes, it is like it's one of the best openings of a video game of this generation. And two, it's so cool, again, to get that kind of rare look at, hey, these people were really just given the opportunity to do whatever the hell they wanted because Bethesda needed a game called Prey to get shipped. Because of a whole bunch of backstory that we don't need to put on your podcast because it would bore the shit out of people.
Well, I imagine that'll be a no-clip doc, right? If they're working with Arcane.
I don't think it will because Bethesda's in perpetual litigious nature with all of its outside the studio.
Okay. Well, big yikes. Well, maybe not then. Anyway, Prey Mooncrash, another roguelike that is that is a AAA one. I would love to see that kind of thing show up more in AAA, but I kind of agree with you. It does seem like something, not to turn this into another Game Pass hour with Steven and Brendan and now Chris Plant, but I do see the like shorter game experience via all of the studios that Microsoft acquired potentially being or lending itself to a roguelike kind of thing, right? Like that would be so perfect for Game Pass in the same way, a 10 episode series would be great for Netflix. I think, something that they could keep on Game Pass forever that is technically infinitely replayable like a Spelunky, just feels like so, I want that to happen now that I'm saying it out loud. Anyway, do we have any more thoughts about Spelunky before we move on? I mean, I have a ton, but we've already been talking for almost an hour.
And we have to get into the shit because what we're about to talk about next is like, I'm going to ruin people's day. I am ready for it.
Yeah.
I mean, last time we talked about this game in detail, I started crying like on air. So that's the energy I'll be bringing to the table.
I love it. I'm right there with you.
I think why don't we take a break then, and we'll get into the next segment, which will be Nier Automata, and it will be spoiler free for the first part. I did it. Thank you.
Yeah. Just to wrap up, Spelunky, one of the best games of all time, maybe the best game of all time, in Steven and my top 5 games of the decade. Yes. Cool. All right. Let's take a break, and when we come back, Nier Automata. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. We're going to talk about Nier Automata. I just actually peek behind the curtain, whatever. The three of us have been talking for like 20 straight minutes, I think, trying to avoid talking about Nier Automata. Steven just called it the looming cloud above the three of us, which it absolutely is.
It's something that means a lot to all of us in I think, extremely personal ways. And I think we're all excited to share that, but it's a big thing, Yeah. It's a big ordeal. It's much heavier than talking about Spelunky, I mean, like, Spelunky means a lot, but this is like a different atmosphere.
Yeah, and in this case, Steven and I are switching spots in that I literally just finished the route is the word I'm going to use currently, and I want to actually dig into that a little bit later, maybe.
Yes,
sure. But I finished the final canonical route of Nier Automata yesterday.
Route E.
Yes, Route E. And I have had about 24 hours now to just kind of think about it and let it set in and just
cool.
be real sad, and then also try and do my normal job at work throughout the day while also thinking about Nier, which real difficult.
You should be able to legally call off once you complete Nier Route E, I think. I think every employer should be like, oh, you just beat Nier, take a week, man. Whatever you need.
It's a drop-down menu of your HR thing. It's like, why are you taking off? Oh, you finished Nier.
Oh wow. Shit, man.
Okay. This is your time off will be Route F. You're going to find the real ending in this time alone.
Yeah, they're actually like, do you mean Nier Replicant or Gestalt? And you're like, I mean Automata. And they're like, okay, noob. Oh, wow. Thanks, HR.
Oh my god. Also worth noting that this section will be spoiler free for Nier Automata. So we'll get into
I'm gonna ruin the hell out of Jack and Guards 1, 2, and 3 and Nier Replicant and Gestalt. So I hope you're ready.
Yeah.
Buckle up, dear listener.
We are going to get into spoilers for Nier Automata, it's worth noting, but we just wanted to, in case you have not played the game, I think at least do a top level pitch hey, you should probably play this fucking game, because whoa.
I guess I'll go first if that's okay with you too.
Please.
Terms of my experience with it. So I picked up Nier pretty early into us starting the show. So I think that when we started doing the show together, I had this renewed sense of going into games as blind as possible. Which is kind of hard to do because there's the price point of entry, and there's sort of this, I think, for my time before the show, I had like a handful of like RPGs and series that I trusted enough that when the new one came out, I would get. And that was like, with glowing exceptions, I would stick to what I knew. And doing the show really kind of, I'm seeing the blindfolds the characters are wearing. I'm trying not to make the metaphor too direct, but I just wanted to experience stuff that I had no kind of prior knowledge of and really had that fresh experience. So Nier, I knew almost nothing about. I knew that it was like good, and I'd seen the design of it, and I had some friends who really liked it. Nier Automata.
Okay. I was like, Nier, the original is, people have differing opinions.
So this is like 2018 when we started the show. So it had been like a year since Nier Automata came out. And it was on sale for like nothing. So I picked it up kind of on a whim and was kind of immediately pulled in. I didn't know. I knew I was kind of going in prepared for like a Square Enix JRPG. So like right away, it immediately is not that. Like it starts off as Star Fox basically, and then it becomes like Bayonetta in a way. Obviously Platinum Games helped develop it, so it has that DNA. But I loved it right away, and basically the more I played, the more I was pulled in. And by the end, it was easily one of my favorite games, maybe of all time. We talked about it, in our Game of the Year episode for 2018. Even though it was 2017, I kind of mentioned that, like, even though this isn't from this year, this is the game I played this year that, like, stood with me the most. And when we did our Games of the Decade episode, which was kind of like, we recorded an episode for each year, we got to 2017. Nier was one of the handful of games I highlighted from the decade that, like, really resonated with me.
Yeah, we saved it for last. That was like a pretty solid year of video games, and that was the last one we talked about, because we both knew that it was going to be like a real heavy experience to bring up Nier, especially like 8 hours into a 10-hour recording.
I thought it was beautiful. I think that without getting into the details that we'll probably get into in the next segment, I think that by the end, it fully utilizes how you can tell a story in a video game to like the fullest emotional extent. I think I described it in an early episode as like constantly one-upping itself. Like there are so many kind of heavily orchestrated set pieces and environments, and it's a kind of game where, for those unfamiliar, it's mostly like a hack and slash action RPG, but often the camera will just kind of zoom out or zoom in, or maybe do a bird's eye view, and maybe you're in a vehicle or a mech of some kind, and just by changing the camera, it changes the entire genre of the game itself. So like for a lot of the kind of heavily scripted like main plot beat moments, it feels like this kind of like dance almost of like game genres that are all like kind of building on top of themselves. In a weird way, like we talk about Spelunky being a language, this is not about like player discovery as much as it's the game just unfolding itself to you as an experience. Yeah. And I think that as the game plays around with the camera and changes genre of action, you also, without spoiling, end up seeing a lot of different narrative perspectives as well. And by the end, it zooms out as much as you can zoom out on a piece of fictional media. And the relationship between like a player and a game is like really kind of like examined in a way that I think is beautiful. So like, I think that this game does have a lot of meta elements in that way, that I've gone on record saying like when games are meta, it can go wildly in one way or the other. I think it can come off as a defense sometimes, where it's like, this part stinks. It's like, okay, well, it doesn't make it better. Or it can be something like this, or I often point to Undertale, where it's like the core plot, like the meat and bones of this game is already good. The fact that it's choosing to also do this like elevated experience on top of that is just taking it up to the next level. So I found it to be incredible. And like this whole show is us talking about games we love, but this is one that like I struggle with explaining why without just like breaking down emotionally. So that's where I'm coming from. It's recent, and I also will mention, because I know you'll probably get into this, Chris, I have no prior experience with the rest of the Yoko Taro library. So this is my first and only Yoko Taro game.
Oh wow.
So that's my angle. It's my beat.
That's okay. I'm gonna I've jotted down notes for a now deleted YouTube page. to help us through the story up until Nier Automata, because I think it's worth going over, because I think it gets at something.
I will say real quick, I do know the gist of like Drakengard and Nier, but like I'm sure you will go into further detail with that.
We'll see. But I think I was trying to like add a small thing to your point about metagames, because I agree. Like there's like Duke Hazard or something. This is a game starring Neil Patrick Harris that was like the ultimate cool AAA metal game. That was very meta back in the day. And I think the things that you mentioned with Undertale and Nier are very different in that I don't even think of them as metagames. I think of them as like acts of criticism. Like they're video games. That's like unquestionable. They're very good video games. But they also are critiques of video games. And I don't mean that in like the very highbrow sense of like, well, if you look at it this way, there's a critique buried here. It's like, no, quite literally, these games are not subtle about it. They are critiques of player choice and of how a game ends and what it means to just kill things over and over again, and what it means for a game to be basic. I think like an issue a lot of people have with this game the first time they play it, because again, there are multiple routes. People call them endings, and it's like such a huge thing that I think has set this game back, because people think like, oh, I have to beat the game 5 times? That sounds terrible. And it's like, no, you have to beat the game once, and you have to kind of beat it again somewhat a second time, and then it's just totally different every time after that. But the game, the first time you play it through, feels very not of this generation in a lot of ways. Like the world is very empty, and there's like boxes in places, and you collect items from them. It's very much aware of its video game-ness, and I feel like a lot of this generation, especially in the like America, has been like, we have to hide that. We can't let you know this is a video game. We're not going to have an item thing pop up on screen. And I think this game kind of relishes in that. It relishes in its gaminess. The fact that you can remove the UI to get more space to like upgrade your character. It needs to be a capital V, capital G video game for its message to work, for its critique to work. But again, like that's a challenge, because that assumes that people are going to make it far enough in the game to be cool with what it's doing, to realize that the things that are, quote, bad or old are holistically part of what makes the game special.
I just had a memory of, it was like half an interview and half like a video series of like Yoko Taro and Platinum working on this game. And of course, he's always wearing his mask. And there's a shot of him in an arcade, just him, and he's playing on a pinball machine. And in the video series, he says like that he really loves pinball machines because they're like so extravagant, and like every little detail, kind of like you said with modern day AAA games, it's like every little detail is painted and trying to grab your attention, but like no one's really playing these anymore. They're kind of abandoned, which to me is really like emblematic in the theme park area of Nier, where it's like you're in this area that is like celebrating itself despite the fact that no one is there, and the people that are there are like out of work robots, you know? So like the whole game kind of feels like an abandoned pinball machine in that way, which like just connected the dots when you said that this game is kind of flaunting the gamier parts of it.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great read.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I was like, yeah, I know.
I nailed it.
Yeah, it was a sick read or whatever.
Swish.
Swish.
Chris has had an almost threatening aura about the notes that he has prepared, so I think I'm going to go before he does, just in case.
Good call.
So I picked up Nier Automata on PS4, like literally at the end of 2017, because all of the GOTY podcasts and articles I had read, there was always one like if it was a roundtable podcast, there was always one person in those roundtables who was like, Nier Automata is the best game of the year. There is no question of that, and anything that you tell me will not sway me. And hearing that exact sentiment repeated across like every piece of media I was consuming towards the end of 2017 was like the sole reason I ended up picking it up. And I played through the first route and started playing the second route, and eventually kind of bailed on it because I don't really know why. I just put it down and probably moved on to other stuff, because like the Switch was out at that point, which was very exciting.
That was a big year. That was Breath of the Wild and like a bunch of other stuff coming out that year. So So I ended up bailing on it.
and it wasn't until we talked about it, you and I, Steven, because I had mentioned that you would probably like it at one point, and you played it, and then talked about it a lot on this show. And
I became that person who was in the room like, this is the best game ever made, no questions.
Yeah. And I looked in the mirror and realized that, oh no, I had become the 8 other people on the podcast who just dunked on it.
We just switched places of who's the 8 other people.
But I knew that I was going to go back to it eventually, and I'm really glad that this episode happened. It gave me the reason to go back and finally finish it. And I'm going to be totally honest. Like I said, I finished this game yesterday, so like probably some recency bias here, but I honestly don't think so. I do think Nier is like maybe one of the best games ever made. And I've been thinking about it a lot in the context of Spelunky, which I also think is one of the best games ever made, as we just talked about and went very in depth on. But the main difference, I think, between those two is that while Spelunky is a game that I think is influential and is like a video game and has rippled out into a ton of other games that exist, and we're seeing its influence far and wide, I feel like Nier Automata is weirdly kind of like solitary and not like, I don't know how you would pull an influence from this game. I could see people being influenced by it, but I don't know how we'd be able to read that in another game going forward without it almost like borrowing things whole cloth in a way that would be, I think, like Yoko Taro as an auteuristic dude, and the way that he's crafted that game is so singular and so his energy pumped into the thing that anything else would kind of be false in a way. Any influence that would be pulled from this game would not be the actual vision of the creator making that influenced game, if that makes any sense. I am so blown away by this thing. I'm actually having a hard time even talking about it, but like it feels to me like I just like read a dense work. I feel exactly the way I felt when we talked about Kentucky Route Zero. I feel exactly the way I felt, which Chris, I know you did not like this game as much as we did, but I feel exactly the way I felt when we finished Last of Us 2, and I really need to like take a lot of time to like kind of let that sink in. But in this case, it's not like Last of Us 2 so wears its themes on its sleeve throughout the entirety of it. You know, it is constantly hitting you over the head with what it means. And there are a couple swerves here and there, and you can go back and you can listen to our very long bonus episode about that if you want to hear about those twists and turns. But Nier Automata, to me, does not have any like twists to it. Anything that is framed as a twist in a narrative, I think you can kind of see coming from a mile away. All it's really doing is pulling the rug out from the protagonists over and over again to just teach you more about the theme. All it's doing is hammering the theme home until the very final moment in the very final route, which I really think does reframe everything that the game has been teaching you in a new light. And although look, I really want you to play this, dear listener. Although it's going to be a dour experience, by the end of that final route, Route E, I think it is like a wildly optimistic thing. And I'm so glad to like have that idea ingrained in my head forever now. And I'm gonna stop because Chris looks like he wants to say something.
Oh yeah, no, I just agree with you. I think it's a positive game. I've had this thing during the pandemic where people are like, man, it's a real bummer. You shouldn't watch Plot Against America or Perry Mason. There's a dead baby in that show, and I'm like, oh man, I can't watch that. And then I watched it, I'm like, well, that part sucked, but like everything else is pretty fun. Like swing in LA, like that's exactly what I need.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with Nier, where it's a drag at times, but existentially it's a drag. But yeah, by the end, I came away from it just completely rejuvenated. Yeah. And I can't think of many video games can't think of many pieces of media that give me that. Yeah, it's a gift. Should I catch you both up on the story?
Please, I honestly, yes. That's all I have to say.
This could be a disaster. There might be a point where I'm doing this and you're like, you know what? That's actually enough. And maybe our listeners don't want to hear this.
I will just say I want to just give you what I am kind of like the jar that I'm going to fill these thoughts in, kind of metaphorically. It's like to me, it seems like Yoko Taro has a kind of esoteric enough sense of humor that his justification of how all these stories connect is almost like, let's see who figures this out. It's almost like a challenge.
I think that's a great point going into it, and we'll circle back to that after I get through it.
Okay,
because I think sharing this, I think it gets at something with Nier Automata. Okay, so thing people should know. Nier Automata is a sequel to Nier, which itself was 2 games. Nier Replicant and Gestalt. I believe those were the names. One is the US version. One is the Japanese version. One takes place significantly earlier because it is about a man and a child, and the other one's he's like an old man. I don't know. It's a lot of stuff. Those games are the sequel to the Drakengard series, which is a trilogy. Okay. And the second game in the Drakengard series takes place in an entirely separate timeline and means nothing. So already off the bat, we're off to a great start. We just got rid of the game.
I don't even think Yoko Taro was involved in that one, right?
He wasn't. Correct. He was not. Cool. And also, I think Drakengard 3 is actually a prequel to Drakengard 1.
Okay.
Right.
Welcome to the hell. Okay. So here's the great thing. I can actually summarize Drakengard 1, 2, and 3 in an instant. A whole bunch of stuff happens in like a medieval looking alternate dimension. There's a thing called the red eye disease. There's a flower that turns a woman into a super weapon. She has a flower that replaces her eyeball. She goes to a brothel and works with these other women. They fight other women. A whole bunch of bad stuff happens with this disease. Okay. And there's dragons. Drakengard. Boom, we did it. Drakengard trilogy. And all of the respective novellas and plays and whatever else was around it, because there was a lot more.
Yeah.
So congratulations, everybody. You're now experts on Drakengard. That's like a little thing I just did for you.
Here's my post-historicis read on Zero as a anti-hero. No, I'm kidding.
Yes,
please go ahead.
Thank you. Oh, wow. So you're keenly aware of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
I did my research. Yeah, I got a little bit of notes. Yeah.
You got a little bit of notes. So you can correct me on this. What matters most is, and of course these games had multiple endings. In the ending of one of these games, a dragon and a beast queen, the beast queens are the bad guys in this scenario, they fall through a dimensional tear into a new dimension, which happens to be ours. And they land in early 2000s, then the present Shinjuku in Tokyo, and begin what is called the 612 incident. And this dragon and this beast queen, which like the beast queen, when I describe it, think of something that is like the size of like basically the entire city, right? Like it's huge.
Yeah.
The beast queen is killed, is turned into a pillar of effectively salt, is shot by a rocket that makes it just crumple all over Shinjuku, right? Like, great, we did it, boom! Except for the particles of this thing gives people white chlorination syndrome. Okay, are you ready for this?
I think so.
I know. I hope everybody took their acid before the show started. So you get white chlorination syndrome, right? People in Shinjuku suddenly have white chlorination syndrome. People who get this, they're turned into effectively themselves a pillar of ash, except for some people aren't. The reason they're not is because when you get white chlorination syndrome, you are put before a god and you are given a choice to become a dead pillar of salt, effectively, or a mindless drone that is a tool of the god. You become a weapon of it, right?
Oh, okay.
So now we're in the real headspace. I'm so sorry that people are like rapidly unsubscribing from your podcast as we do this. And I'm only in the beginning, so I'm gonna work through this quickly.
Can I admit something? I hate that I knew white chlorination syndrome going into this.
I'm so glad that I'm not the only person on this podcast to be tortured by this. So,
okay, we share this burden.
So, okay, for people who are like trying to follow, because I know we're going through a lot here.
Yeah.
That's what the bonus episodes are all about, Chris. Don't worry about it. That's what we're here to do.
Yeah, Dragon and God fought. People now have a pandemic on their hands. Japan's like, hey, we got to put a wall around Shinjuku. People are like, no, thank you. A celebrity dies. And they're like, actually, yes. We got to protect the slums.
Okay.
Oh, my God.
Let's put a wall around Shinjuku. They do it. While this happens, and all the kind of drones that the god created formed the Legion. The head of it is named the Red Eye. We'll throw back to Drakengard there, right? Some people think it's the protagonist of the original Drakengard. Who knows? Nobody knows officially. The US is like, hey, you've got a problem, Japan. They bring airstrikes to Japan. Japan's like, I don't know if you know what's up, but this is not cool.
Yeah.
And the Japanese government's like, go for it. Just kill those things. They bomb. Bombing Shinjuku releases the white chlorination syndrome into the air and infects China now. Boom! We're up to 2014. Welcome, everybody. We're getting closer and closer to the present every day. You thought, surely this couldn't keep going. We're halfway there, baby. So here's where we actually get to the part that matters for Nier Automata. Now that you've finished Nier Automata. This is where you're going to start being like, oh, I see what they're doing here. So we have this problem, right? People have white chlorination syndrome. They get it. They meet a god, and the god says you can either die and turn into salt or turn into a drone. So scientists come up with a great idea. They'll use this particle that's infecting people to split people's bodies and their souls apart. That way, they can effectively run this thing out, and then at a later point, they can bring people's bodies and souls back together once everything's safe. And the public is like, no, thank you. That is insane. Like,
I have seen Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah, that's clearly a bad idea. You've done a bad.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, clearly a bad idea. We heard you. We are going to instead, because this is definitely going to be much cooler with the public, we're going to contract a bunch of teenagers, because this drug that we've created works best on teens, to fight the legion of these drones. Maybe we'll use some dragon blood. I don't know. It's still unclear to me. So now they have teens. They effectively the Halo program. And their teens infected with maybe dragon blood are fighting these drones of their dead friends and family all over the world because they blew it up. It's just spread everywhere. Okay. And here's where we're getting into Nier territory now. I know you thought, like, we're never going to get to Nier territory. We're getting there, I promise. So now replicants are created as part of the Gestalt program. Okay? I know. So what happens with a replicant, and I swear this is where we're getting really close. If a soul loses its body, it can take on the form of a replicant now. So now people aren't as freaked out because it's like, well, I've had my body and soul separated. What if my body just gets eviscerated? Don't worry. You can just become a replicant, right? Now we're getting into that Nier Automata language. Is everybody still with me? Have I bored you into tedium?
No, I'm all in.
My eyes hurt from being as wide as they've been for the past how long this has been.
Okay, so there's the head of the Legion, which is these drones. He is killed. His name is Red Eye. He's killed in Jerusalem. We are now in the year 2030. Effectively, they've done it. They've stopped the Legion. Boom, great. But that the chlorination syndrome, it's still spreading. So now the scientists are back and they're like, hey, remember that program that we created where we could separate your souls from your bodies? What if we did that? And people are like, you know what? A pandemic is happening and everybody's dying and being turned into pillars of salt. Let's do it. Let's separate our souls from our body. What could go wrong? So they do it. They're like, great. And they're like, well, what are we going to do to watch over us while all of our souls are separated from our body? And they're like, androids. We'll create a giant army of androids who will watch over us. We'll also create the Grimoire Project, which is just living books. We won't go too deep into that. So there's Nier Replicant. Honestly, we've effectively now gotten to the story of Nier 1.
Right.
That's literally everything that just gets us there.
Yeah.
I won't get too far into that, but the reason I mention all of this, because I do think it's all really relevant before we get into spoilers for Nier Automata. I think it's some important table setting. Is one, the story is stupid and doesn't make any sense. And this actually is true for Nier Automata 2. Despite it being deeply impacting and like, I love it. I think it's perfect. But I think you got to this without having to read the entire story of Nier and Drakengard. There's a sense of humor about how like utterly abstract and weird and meaningless this is. And it's almost like abstract painting in where it shouldn't work. It should be void of meaning. It should be stupid. We should be laughing at it. And yet we find ourselves looking at it and like somehow like a magic eye, it just like hits at something so much deeper. And I think,
totally agree.
Yeah, this obsession that Yoko Taro has with the disconnect between the body and the soul and purpose and what is human. In all these games, if you actually say the story out loud, it's tedious and boring, and I'm sorry that I just did it to everybody, but I think it gets to this point. It's irrelevant. What matters is the opportunities it gets to say these richer things that it couldn't say without putting that story in place. The story does not serve a plot. It stirs ideas. And it shouldn't work. It should be pretentious as all hell. But it ends up not being that. It ends up being very human and profound and sweet and tender. I've never really encountered anything like it. The reason also I shared all the other games is, unlike Nier Automata, those games are not fun. They're really not fun at all. And I definitely recommend that you just watch recaps of how they work and what makes them special. So yeah, that is, I am sorry that I did that to you.
No,
but
that was amazing.
I had to share it because it's so weird.
I think you're right. I think it's super important, right? I mean, like, on the surface level, right, Yoko Taro has headed up a bunch of games that all like did not do great critically or really financially, and teaming him up with Platinum was a great move, and created something great, right? Like, he is the idea guy behind these incredible mechanics that we got to experience. But outside of that, I think you're totally right. Like, his constant like attacking at this idea over and over and over again, he finally broke through the other side with this one, you know, and this ends up not just being, you know, I've talked a lot on this show also about how much I love androids who want to be human in like any piece of media. I'm a big fan of Data from Star Trek. I'm a big fan of Vision in Marvel. This game is not only trying to do that, but does it in a way I've never seen before, which is like rare on its own in any kind of sci-fi. And I think that's what makes great sci-fi by itself. But not only that, it's wrapping up into that idea almost all of like human philosophy on the way there, which I don't want to get into until we start talking about spoilers. But the fact that it is constantly referencing different philosophers and their ideas and subverting them in interesting ways, and then coming out the other end with a story about nihilism that's optimistic is like difficult to do. That's a hard thing to do. But like on the very surface of all of that is a video game that has what you might have heard, dear listener, are multiple endings. And I just want to say, before we get into spoilers, my last minute pitch, and maybe you guys can do yours before we also move into spoilers, but my last minute pitch is, do not believe that there are multiple endings to this game. There is one ending to this game. There are a lot of different times that the credits will roll, and it's all misdirection leading you to the final ending. I truly believe that Nier's routes A through E are one collective story that should be completed as such. Steven's been telling me this over and over again for like literally 2 years at this point, and he's been right the whole time. And I just want to say that Steven should be very proud of himself for
I am
finally
very proud
making
of
me
myself.
do it.
I'm proud of myself for knowing what white chlorination syndrome was ahead of time. Thank you, Chris.
I just think that Nier Automata is like, I will be thinking about this game probably for the rest of my life. And I think it's an important work, and I hold it up to like the best books I've ever read and the best movies I've ever seen. Like, it really is kind of a pinnacle of what a video game can be, while also, as Chris, you mentioned, like flaunting the fact that it is a video ass game. And I think it's so special. And now I see the rest of my time. Thank you.
I just want to add real quick about you both made such amazing points. Like, Chris, you're saying this idea of like this overarching narrative that connects every game he's ever made being the ultimate like history of Nier Automata. And I think the reason it doesn't come off as pretentious or overwhelming in the game, on top of not really being mentioned directly, is the fact that like even in the story, like the setup of Nier Automata is that humans are hiding on the moon and they created androids to battle machines that were created by alien invaders. And like even that, like everything, the whole history of white chlorination syndrome and the alien and human war, all of that, even before you're told, feels like it already happened. You know, it's like the story is over. And here are these characters who are every character in the game, even one of the dozens of nameless machines you fight, every character is trying to give themselves meaning in a world that has denied them that. And even if they look at their own history, it doesn't make any fucking sense. You know, like even if they try to see like what made the world like this, what made the world like this is a joke ending from Drakengard 1. Like it doesn't have, you know, like there's no like, so it really aids. And I think, and I'm glad you went through the whole thing, Chris, because I think that aids this feeling of like Dadaism reality and these characters that are like begging for a single reason to explain why they're there, which I think matches like existentialism as a whole, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think Dadaism is a perfect phrase for it. I mean, genre form. But I think it's important to remember, if you, as like somebody who's playing this for the first time, Drakengard takes place in an entirely different dimension, and then 2 takes place in a different timeline of that dimension. Nier, Gestalt, and Replicant take place at 2 different windows of time, but they take place in like long ago. I mean, well,
1,000 years, I think.
Long ago in the relationship of Nier Automata, but far in the future of the world that we're in. And what I think is like so interesting about this and how they don't talk, they really just don't talk about a lot of what happened in the previous games. They're merely echoes of each other, and there's little signs of things that can survive longer than humans, like disease. Is like that's history, right? That we don't look back on what happened in ancient Egypt and are like, well, how does that affect what I'm doing today? It's like, I mean, there are some things like, you harvest crops like that's a connection. I guess we can make that. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But that's so much how these games engage with each other. They taking place so far apart from each other. They recognize, no, there's no reason for story-wise these things to connect. The only thing that can connect them is themes and the loosest bits of hints of what came and what went. I didn't even bring up Emil, who shows up in Nier Automata, and who in previous game made like 75 million copies of himself to fight an alien war. But I don't want to get into that because now we're getting into spoilers territory.
Yeah, but it's worth bringing up Emil because Emil and I think Devola and Popola, the two androids, those are the three characters from the original Nier game. And even then, like, if you're just playing Automata for the first time and you run into those characters, like, you wouldn't know or need to know that they were in the first game.
Right, because they have self-contained stories that serve themselves and have their own act structures within the story of Automata that I think are great.
Emil, it makes it a little bit sadder to know, but everyone else, it's pretty self-contained. But yeah, it's my final pitch is it's great. I echo Brendan. You've heard me cry about it. It's a good game. Chris, do you have anything else to say before we get into spoilers? I think we're all antsy for spoilers, but I want to give the floor to you if you have anything else to say.
It's a perfect game. If Spelunky is a perfect game, Nier Automata is a perfect game about video games. That's what
I like that. That's the back of the box for the episode.
There we did. We did it.
We linked the two. Cool.
Hey, dear listener, we're going to take a quick break, and when we're on the other side of that break, it's all going to be spoilers from here. So please go play Nier Automata and come back and listen to the rest of this, because if you're anything like me, you'll be desperate to hear some shit about this video game as soon as you're done playing it. And I'm so glad to be able to join the choir of people singing about it, which is a more direct reference than you even know yet. Here's the break. Hello, we're back, and we are in the spoiler section for Nier Automata, the Square Enix and Platinum Yoko Taro game. I don't even know where to begin talking about this, honestly, outside of, like, I sure did just finish it yesterday and have, like, consumed as much media and read as much writing about it as possible. And, like, my brain is just bursting with things I want to talk about. I think, like, chief among them, maybe just at the top of it, is, like, very specifically talking about the quote unquote endings and the routes and stuff, and just saying, like, on a whole, I think the biggest misstep of the whole game, if I had to say there's one thing that I didn't like about it, not that I didn't like about it, but one thing that I would change if I had to play, like, shitty backseat podcast game designer, is just I think the B route being the replaying of the A route with some slight changes. Like, if that was truncated at all, I think way more people would finish this game. As much as I love playing as 9S, and I really think it's, like, fascinating once you get into his moveset and you start to realize that hacking is his forte, and, like, maybe attacking isn't even worth it at a certain point. Like, you should just be hacking all the time. That's great. And once you start hacking into, I think it's Simone, the opera singer boss.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That moment in particular is really, like, the turn for that game for me. If I had made it to that point, I think on my first playthrough, I would have played through the rest of it if I had made it to that, because once you roll up on her and she's essentially a proxy for the philosopher whose last name I'm forgetting, but second wave feminist philosopher, and she's in love with Jean-Paul, the robot, who is Jean-Paul Sartre, who, like, they actually had a relationship in real life as well. Like, if all of that stuff had coalesced in my first playthrough, I would have finished it way back when, but I stopped right before then, and I absolutely regret doing that. But that I think is, like, the one bummer of the game. Was like, oh man, am I really just playing through the same game a second time? Yeah. I don't know how you guys feel about that bit in particular. Just to get the one negative thing out of the way before we just heap praise on it.
I think Route B, and as Brendan said, like, Route B is most of the same beats as Route A, but you're playing as 9S, who for the first part of the game is like 2B's sidekick. I think that route shines. There are key moments in the plot of Route A, which is like, I would say anywhere between 10 and 15 hours. Like, it's not super, and that's the thing. And this is something that, like, I think you alluded to earlier, Chris, with calling them routes and not endings. Cause like A to E is like a 20 to 30 hour RPG. Like, it's not like a Persona length thing. So I always use that as an example of like, what's an 80-hour RPG?
Yeah. For me, it was 32 hours. My most recent playthrough of all of it.
And there's side quests and stuff, which we might get into. But I think what you're alluding to is like, my take on Route B is that it has some of my favorite moments in the game. So I think
same.
I think it shines the most where there are key moments in Route A where 2B and 9S get split up, and in those moments, I think it's incredible. And I think also the very, very beginning of Route B is awesome. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about Route A first, though, which might inform my read on Route B, if you guys don't mind, unless you had something to
no, please. Yeah, no, let's do it.
Because I think, you know, in our spoiler free segment, we ironically called to the ending being the kind of defining moment of this game. And I think that what you share with me, Brendan, is that this game asks a lot of trust in the player, especially in Route B, to know that there's going to be like a bigger sucker punch later on.
Yeah.
Because Route A is pretty good still, and it's a self-contained thing in its own right. Like, if this game was just Route A, it would not be, I think, a game that the three of us would be talking about with such fervor, but I think it would still be beloved. Because
it would be Astral Chains. It would be every other platinum
yeah,
game.
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to kind of flaunting the video game part of it, Route A is flaunting the game's setting and the game's mechanics and sprinkling in intrigue, but never really committing to the bigger ideas. But I think it is forecasted, and especially in the very beginning, the first scene in the entire game is you are amongst like 8 Yorha ships, and Yorha is the type of android that 2B and 9S are. They're like the elite military android units. They all have like sleek monochromatic outfits, and what's special about the Yorha units is that they can be mass produced. So as long as your black box is intact, which is like your central core soul data, your gestalt, if you will, you'll be fine. You can die and you'll come back. And the first thing that happens in the game is you're piloting the ship as 2B, and you're hearing very like Star Fox audio over the speak, like, this is 8B, I'm here. And then, you know, 8B is shot the fuck down real quick. Yeah. But that's it for me playing it for the first time. And I knew the game was largely about death and about kind of these questions. I mean, not to the same extent that I realized later, but like the first thing that happens in this game is that people around you are dying, independent of your actions. They're getting shot down with major lasers, and all this military speak is kind of like conditioning everyone else to not be affected by that. So that's the first kind of mood that's set emotionally. Mechanically, you're playing Galaga, then you're playing Asteroid, and it's like, oh shit, they're like showing me every arcade game that I know, kind of like by second nature at this point. And then there's that iconic moment where 2B jumps out of the ship, and then suddenly it's a hack and slash game. And I think it introduces her really well. She starts talking to 9S over their radio, and 9S is immediately kind of like more human in his personality. He's kind of like trying to get to know her. He's like, hey, I usually work alone. This is great. And she's like, emotions are prohibited, you know, typical like Cloud Strife wall put up.
Yeah.
And I think that in that intro, you go from this sort of like military ignoring death happening around you, 9S trying to reach out to be as a human, but she's like sticking to that protocol. And then you fight these giant bosses that are really exciting and really exhilarating. And you're getting like a taste of what the game is maybe going to be later, more consistently. And it ends up with 9S getting injured enough, and the two of you getting surrounded by these giant, like rusted steel factory mechs. Yeah. And you feel the scale of it, because you're like, you know, you've just gone from these different perspectives, like being in the air and kind of seeing all these machines as like small things shooting very video gamey spheres at you. But then when you're on the land, the attacks look the same, which I think is very purposeful and really pays off. Yeah. And it ends with 2B goes like very quickly but organically from not getting to know 9S because it's a professional mission, and then like ignoring protocol to save him and really showing her own humanity. It ends with them showing each other their own humanity by sacrificing themselves for each other. So like knowing how the game ends, the intro covers all of that.
Yeah, it's really all of the game in the first.
It plants the seed that it will further develop. And I think like that to me is still one of my favorite segments of the game. And then it goes to, you know, like you learn, it settles down and goes into like RPG chore mode where you're like, go collect these parts. And like then you're in the open worlds. And that to me is, I think, where also someone might bounce to the game because, like you said, Chris, it's so empty and there's like not like a lot to do, and they're giving you side quests that are largely kind of tedious. Yeah,
but even that, what's so cool about it is so you mentioned like 8S or whatever gets killed at the beginning, right? So you work through this entire kind of like industrial plant where you fight these giant creatures, and then you get thrown into this city where you can go and get your missions that are just generic side quests. But one of the earlier side quest that you get in this first route is you hear rumors from another android about her mentor, and it's like, oh, I need to go find her something from her mentor, something that she can remember her by, because I think her black box was destroyed. And you go back to just effectively play through the beginning of the game, but just in reverse. And as you're going through it, you start discovering things like the whole game. You can find android bodies and take the materials from them, more or less. But you find a weapon that appears to be maybe your weapon from the last time you died, and suddenly you have this new weapon. And then you work your way through the entire factory, and then you find the body of this android, and you hack into its system. And you learn from its memory that, like, oh, this android knew something about what was going on in this war and how meaningless it is between the androids and the robots, and was planning to go AWOL. And, like, hear this thing that is, like, yes, the beginning of every 1980s arcade shmup, where it's like, oh no, fighting Pilot 3, the down! Somebody tell their kids!
Right.
Is like, oh no, that person had like an internal life, and is like really wrecked by something that later in the game will pay off huge. I mean, I think that's the first time you really get a hint of what's really going on in this game.
Totally.
And it's all tied to, again, this like disposable character in any other video game, and you having to find their body. Yeah, I mean, again, when I talk about it as a critique of video games, like that to me is that perfect example of, hey, in the most like Peter Molyneux way, like, what if you had to find out what happened to the other ship who died in Galaga? It's like, oh no, it's actually super sad.
Right. Like it's taking things you would do by second nature in a different game, but actually add the appropriate emotional weight to it. Right. You know? I think, I mean, for me playing throughout A the first time, those moments definitely stood out. And there's also, I think, a similar side quest early on where there are two Yorha deserters. There are two androids that like left and you have to find them. And then you kill them and your pod's like mission complete, and 9S is like, whoa, that sucked. Like I can't believe, like, we have dehumanized machines enough that we don't feel guilt, but like that was one of us. That was an android. And I think that's the other really brilliant thing about the game is like, to the player, we know they're all robots already. So like there's this kind of immediate irony that one thinks of themselves as more human than the other just because of how they appear.
Right. It skirts around the Hotline Miami, BioShock, like even Last of Us Part 2 situation where it's like, you kill this person, don't you feel bad about killing this person? Or in Hotline Miami's case, it's like, ooh, do you like killing these? You know, by making it all androids and machines, you don't even have to ask that question at any point. It just is about the verb to kill, not about what you're killing, which I think is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah. And it's allowed to be, I don't even know if funny is the right word, but it's so abstracted that it doesn't, I know that you'll love Last of Us 2. I don't want to dunk on it too much.
No, it's okay.
Honestly, it's fine.
But what I love, again, talking about early in the game, there's a scene where you come across a bunch of these robots who are, I mean, just these cute little pills,
like
kind of Fall Guys-y in nature, who don't really even want to attack you. And you come across a mass orgy of them, and they're like rocking babies, and it's just like, oh, they think that they can make more. Like they're experiencing this deeply human sensation, not just of procreation, but of like love and of parenthood. And then you slaughter them all. and while you're slotting them, they're like, no, please, sorry. And I think 9S is like, hey, that's weird. Like,
yeah, 9S keeps being like, they're just saying random words, and they're like, please stop hitting me, 2B. And you're like, this is not random. they're feeling stuff.
And I think like it gets away with a lot of things that I don't like in games like Last of Us 2 or Spec Ops: The Line, where it's so ridiculous,
right?
That I'm like, oh my, like I don't know. It allows that part of my brain that gets like, I guess, judgy about it, or feels like it's too on the nose to kind of disarm itself.
Yeah.
The closest comparison, sorry, this is such a tangent, I'll make it really quick, but it reminds me of The Leftovers, which is a show that I love. And The Leftovers season 1 is very heavy and dark and hard to watch. And then The Leftovers season 2 and 3 has like sequences where the main character goes into a dream world and can only enter a government facility by putting his giant penis on a penis reader machine. And like once you get to that point, it's like, oh wait, I'm so disoriented that yes, you can 100% hit me with this profound story about what it means to like live and die.
Yeah.
Because it's just enough to like knock me off balance.
I agree. I mean, I think like that moment you just spoke of where they're having an orgy and that actually leads to them giving birth to Adam and Eve,
right?
The two like main antagonists in the beginning. That's the moment where I realized this game was wildly different than, because like up until then they're setting up the like, ow, don't hit me. And I'm like, okay, are we the bad guys and the machines are innocent or whatever?
Yeah.
And then it's like it's not that clear cut. It's just like they are trying to, like you said, find meaning, find what it means to be human. And in this moment, they're exploring birth and sex and all this stuff. But I think that sense of humor and the achievement you get when you kill Adam for the first time says it's a beautiful baby boy. I'll never, like, I just watched that and I was like, what the fuck just happened? Then I got that achievement.
Yeah.
But it had the same, and I honestly, even though Brendan and I really liked Last of Us 2 by the end of it, like there are parts of that game that are trying to do a similar thing that don't work for me. Namely they got Duncan, or whatever, like where they shout out a name. Cause like that's a moment where the game is like, take this moment very seriously rather than like, here's a moment that happened and interpret it in whatever way you want. And we're just giving you like pieces to experience. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Sorry. I feel like I'm talking too much, but
no, please.
Not at all.
You're the guest on the podcast, Chris. It's okay.
The thing you said of like, in this moment, they're learning about sex and love and parenthood, I think is spot on, because throughout the rest of the game, you do have these other moments where you come across the robots, and there's another period where they're like effectively have created castles and created like kingdoms and social hierarchies.
Yeah.
And again, I think the thing that this game benefits from, obviously there are a lot of robots who are philosophers, is that it doesn't have to rely on these people in this moment, in this period of about 3 months, represent humanity. Do you get it? It's like, oh, well, no, actually, these robots are discovering humanity. So, like, we're able to reflect on all these things because these robots are, I guess, kind of just like palming their way through it, trying to figure it out. And that to me, that scope, I think, is what I appreciate so much about Yoko Taro's stuff. Again, it's like, it doesn't make sense, but that's okay, because the scope itself lets it get at things that are so big that if you do try to make it fit neatly in here's a domestic drama in which these people all represent the larger ills of humanity, it just doesn't work as well for me.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier in pre-spoilers, talking about, like, I don't think that this game has twists so much as it is just pulling the rug out from under the protagonist to make the themes even clearer. Saying that, humanity has been long extinct was not exactly shocking in the moment that they finally revealed that information. Saying that the aliens were dead also was not very shocking when that information was revealed. The thing that actually was shocking to me was that the robots were programmed to quote unquote defeat the enemy, and without an enemy they started needing to create their own, and that's where Yorha came from and things like that. But on top of that, they also needed to evolve. One of the reasons they got rid of the aliens in the first place was because the aliens were static as far as they could tell. They weren't upgrading quote unquote as quickly as machines could. So they were like, oh yeah, we're obviously better than these things because the aliens aren't evolving fast enough, so let's just get rid of them and let's form our own thing. And they looked to humanity. They looked around at the environment environment that they were stuck in at that point and decided to look at humanity and try every philosophical outlet that humanity had to offer simultaneously. And all of them broke from the network to try all of these individually to see which one would allow them to actually progress and become as gods, become something greater in a certain sense, So that's where you get the Forest Kingdom with who I think is led by Immanuel Kant, who Stephen and I, you and I just talked about that his philosophy recently when we talked about the indie game thing in itself during the Itch.io bundle conversation. But like it's literally a giant king robot who is so kind that everybody else in the kingdom decides that they need to follow him, and then when he dies or when his robot shell starts to collapse, they're like, let's take his brain and put it in a baby, and eventually he'll grow up into a big strong king again. And of course he doesn't, because he's a robot and he doesn't grow like that, and they're all very confused, and they're like, well, he's cute anyway, and that's great, and that's just one. And then you have Pascal, who is I guess
Pascal.
Yeah, Pascal and his pacifist village, which like is fascinating just from like, okay, we're going to try and remove ourselves, and maybe pacifism is the way forward. Maybe not being part of a war is actually the outlet that will allow us to progress in some way. And very quickly throughout the course of the game, you find out that that's not okay. You can't just go out into the woods and pretend that the rest of the world isn't happening around you. That's not an okay way to live your life. And at the end of it, Pascal realizes that he does need to exude some kind of violence on the world to be able to protect the things he loves. I think it's really, really fascinating that this game is able to take all of these different ideas and contextualize them in a way that like doesn't mean anything as you're playing through it in Route A or B. It doesn't mean it is completely bonkers throughout the entirety of I would say the first two routes for the most part, and the way that it all wraps itself up in saying these robots, these machines are just trying to find meaning, and they're doing it the exact way humanity did, is fascinating. And then on the other end of that, you have the androids who created meaning for themselves and are withholding it from the other androids to allow them to continue to have meaning. The first thing that happens in this game, the very first thing, is the game opens up and 2B flies in with the other Yorha units, and she says something along the lines, I'm very much paraphrasing, but she says something along the lines of essentially, existence is a curse, when can we kill our own god, pretty much. In this game, as you mentioned in the pre-spoiler thing, Stephen, God's been dead for a long time. Humanity has been dead for a long time. The war is already over. It persists because everybody has decided that it needs to persist because they don't know what to do in the absence of that.
And our power structure is our own God. Like
yes.
That's, I mean, you kind of kindly danced around it, but like,
yes,
Shubi and 9S's boss effectively is their, like, they're knowingly providing them with purpose just because they think it is like a
worse to not have
the right thing to do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that is a great summary of it. Stephen, you're hinting at digging into the Pascal story.
Yeah, please do.
Oh yeah, I mean, so Pascal, I think, serves a very special place in the story because, like, as you said, we're seeing these machines kind of like, and it feels like nothing is clicking yet. Even the factions of machines that have dedicated themselves to a king or to orgies or to eating androids, which that's really came out of left field. Pascal is a very important character and is one who throughout the course of the game is an ally kind of by default, but I think is the first machine to really act like an android. Like by the time we meet Pascal, we as a player think of Pascal in the same lens we do 9S or 2B. We're like, I care about this person. They have a name. That's not just like machine with hat, like it's, and I think that's also kind of the critique of games where like there are a lot of RPGs that will name all NPCs like grumpy man or like man with suit, and like it does that with the machines.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll jump ahead because we're not beholden to like A, B, C, D here in our discussion.
Yeah.
There's a moment where Pascal in Route C, the pacifist village he lives in, has become overrun by this logic virus that makes every machine act berserk. And at that point, you're playing as A2, who we might describe later, but she's like in the beginning kind of like the Vegeta antagonist who becomes the hero later on. It's kind of disturbing how often DBZ is like a template in my head. Anyway, you go to Pascal's village and they're like, I think it's actually, there's a scene where Pascal is reading I can't remember the exact philosopher, but they're reading a book of philosophy, and like there's a question posed to them that coincidentally the next day the forest is like attacking itself.
Yeah, it's Nietzsche. It's Nietzsche.
Yeah, that's Nietzsche. And then A2 like wipes out the village. It's really heartbreaking because like, you know, you become fond of that place over time. And Pascal's like, don't worry, I rescued all the children. We're hanging out at the abandoned factory. I know in Route A, you went through the abandoned factory and it was full of a suicidal cult screaming, become as gods, but it's fine now. We're safe. We're going to hang out there for a bit. You get there and there are the similar kind of Goliath machines from the very beginning of the game coming at you. And this is like, I have never, I rarely scream fuck yeah out loud by myself while playing a video game, but I did in this moment where Pascal finally abandons, like, he's like, okay, this is, I know I'm a pacifist, but like, these kids are all I have left. That's my meaning. My life's meaning is being the protector of this village. So you play as Pascal operating a mech and like, are just like, you know, Pacific Rim bashing these things out of the way. And it's so triumphant in a very video gamey way. And then you go into the abandoned factory and all the machine children have committed suicide. And it's like, that is one of the most devastating moments I've experienced in a video game. And Pascal specifies, he's like, they destroyed their cores. If they destroyed any other part of themselves, they would be fine. We could bring them back via the network. But the cores are like the black boxes, which later are revealed to actually be made of the same material, which is brutal news to 9S in Route D. But Pascal in this moment is like, because, you know, basically in short, the whole game, characters are trying to find meaning. Route A is 2B pretending that she's beholden to her militaristic code, but really her and 9S mean the world to each other. And that's what that route is about, is them realizing that they are each other's world, which is, you know, why I think that story reaches a nice end for a very good game that becomes a great game later on. Yeah. But, sorry, I'm going all over the place. It's hard not to with this game, but Pascal, seeing this, asks A2, like, I can't live anymore. My reason for being alive has been taken away. I even abandoned my pacifist mantle, defending these kids for no reason because they all committed suicide. You either need to kill me or delete my memories. And this is the story I was saying. My roommate walked into my apartment in this exact moment and was like, hey man, how's your day going? I'm like, dude, I've got a question for you in this hypothetical. What would you do?
It is worth noting in this moment, not to cut you off, but it is worth noting that there is a heaping layer of guilt in Pascal's question there, because the last thing Pascal did, or one of the last things Pascal did at that point, was teach the children the concept of fear and anxiety, essentially, which, not to get too into it again, but Pascal's wager, big philosophical idea that the fear of God is the only reason we have any kind of morality in the first place. So kind of a send up of that, I guess, in a way. But anyway, he taught these kids fear, and the fear was their undoing. The fact that the thing outside was so terrifying, that they were so anxious about Pascal losing and the army getting in, that they took their own lives. It makes Pascal feel as though it was his fault that it happened. Which is why he's like, I need you to wipe my memory, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind style, and just like make me forget that I even did that in the first place.
But you can also just walk away. There's actually three options.
Yeah.
Is that what you did? I did not realize till afterwards, because I was in video game mode, and then I felt horrible. Just horrible. The other thing about this game is, so Pascal is also effectively like an RPG store. Like, will sell you things after this. I believe that's right. Again, it's been a while.
Yeah.
But if you choose to wipe his memory, he will then sell you a new weapon, which is the heads of the children who killed themselves as like fists. Whoa. And he's like, I don't know. He's like, I was cleaning out the factory and I found these two things. Seemed like they'd be pretty good for bashing.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he defaults to what he was operating for, which is like gather materials, and which like raises the question of what's the more ethical option there. I think I still defaulted to wiping his memory because like the very end in the final cutscene, there's like they show him for a second if he's still alive, like looking at the rocket, and like they hint at like maybe one day he'll eventually become the person he was, or the machine he was.
Yeah.
But I think kind of going back to the order things a little bit, like Route A to me is largely like a taste of this with the machines, you know, like a sampler platter of philosophy, and 9S and 2B like growing closer together. And the minute they really confide in each other, 2B has to kill 9S, but 9S is secretly backed up his memory in the machines, and that's how Route A ends. And then when you get to the end credits, you get this subtle message from Square like, hey, play it again. You know, that wasn't it.
Yeah.
And this is what you were talking to earlier, Brendan, where Route B is like the same beats, but as 9S. But I think the moments that really stand out are like with Simone, where you're getting like more about why that robot was so obsessed with being beautiful. That was their meaning, you know, that was the thing that they attached to. You get a lot more about Adam and Eve, who are the antagonists of Route A, who kind of come off as a little cheesy the first time. But I think in Route B, you get a lot more backstory, which is basically that Adam decided that his obsession, his meaning was to understand humans. And I mentioned this to you, Brendan, but in Route A, when you fight Adam for the first time, it's in the copied city, which is one of my favorite settings in the game. It's so iconic. Evil Apple Store city cubes. But Adam is there, and he's basically like, I've been trying to figure out what makes humans humans, and I realized it's hatred. It's the primal desire to kill because you hate something that much. And then he's like, check it out, I crucified 9S. And you and 2B are like, fuck this guy, I hate Adam, I want to kill him. And in that exact moment, he turns to the camera and goes like, yes, perfect, like a director. He's like, I want this to be a good boss fight, I want you to kill me.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is you do that, and his brother Eve, who in the flashbacks you get in Route B, really was kind of like 9S. His whole reason for being was just to hang out with his brother. He's robbed of meaning now because he is nothing. So like, which kind of foreshadows, if you don't mind jumping ahead a little bit, 'cause I think we'll probably get to the last three, unless you guys have anything to say about A and B.
Yeah, let's keep rolling.
Let's keep rolling. The Eve state after you kill Adam and his, you know, boss fight where he's screaming, why'd you kill my brother and nothing matters anymore, and all the stuff that like should be trite but isn't because of the impact that like the knowledge of what you did as a player and your feeling while doing it. In Route C, early on, 2B is killed. She's infected by this logic virus, and A2, the Vegeta from Nier Automata, kills 2B kind of out of mercy, and 9S witnesses this, and like 9S slowly becomes like Eve was, where his whole reason for being is robbed. And in those routes, as you play as 9S, he learns the secret of Yorha and that all of this is meaningless, and it kind of just like makes him more and more of a villain. Meanwhile, A2 is learning more about the machines and kind of like picking up where 2B left off. There's a lot more to talk about in those routes, so I want to let you guys speak a little bit, but I just want to set it up.
One quick thing, that's kind of what I mean about them constantly pulling the rug out from the protagonist over and over again. It's not just the protagonist are pulling the rug out from under, it's every single entity in this game that thinks it has an idea of what its meaning is, loses that idea of what its meaning is at some point or another.
Yeah.
And that leaves you at the end of Route E, where it all does feel completely meaningless. Everybody has died. There's pretty much no hope. It's like as low as you could possibly go, which is wild that the like emotional climax of the game is pretty much the exact endpoint of the thing.
Yeah.
But I think that's really fascinating, and I think that's why there's so much philosophy wrapped up in the thing. Is it's like, let's just tackle every single idea we have in here, you know, Eastern and Western philosophy, like let's just zero in on all of it and decimate all of it, and what are you left with at the end of that, you know? And maybe we could talk about what that is. If you'd like to.
Sure. I'll describe it, and I'd love to hear all of your experiences, like having the ending of Route E happen the first time, if you don't mind. But basically, the game ends, like Brendan said, you get a variety of different options. It ends with 9S and A2 facing off with each other, and A2's like, 9S, 2B loved you and wanted you to be happy, and he's like, bullshit! You know, and then you fight. Sorry, that was so loud. I will say, too, just real quick, there's the reveal that 2B was 2E, and that's also something that I still don't fully... That's like white chlorination syndrome adjacent in terms of like
I have since learned
sense.
You and I talked about this morning. I have since learned what that means. Do you know, Chris?
To be or not to be? No, I don't know.
Actually, we can circle back to that maybe. But So at one point there is a side quest that you can do that allows you to find another E model machine. Essentially, the E models were undercover Yorha models whose only reason for existence was to wipe out S models if they learned the truth. S models, being scanners and intelligence gatherers, always figure out that humanity is extinct and that the war means nothing. So the E models exist embedded with the S models to kill them over and over and over and over and over again. So when 9S is like, I have never had a partner before, and then later is like, my friends call me Nines, it's like, you don't have any friends, you just constantly remember to be calling you Nines every once in a while before you die and come back again.
Oh wow, okay. Because what confused me was that like because they cut to like every moment 2B has killed 9S, which has always been out of mercy. So I'm like, those were all different scenarios where like he was either infected with the virus.
That's the frustration of 2B's story, is that she has to kill 9S a bunch of times that actually don't matter because he hasn't figured it out yet.
I think the tragedy is that they imply that he knows as well. And that's something that I did really like, was replaying Route B in the very beginning and in the intro that I talked about, when he is like injured with missing a leg on top of one of the mech Goliaths. He orders the pod to back up 2B's memories, and they're like, should we back up yours too? And he's like, no, it's fine, don't even bother. Like, he kind of knows that like he shouldn't, which is really sad. But anyway, you fight, you can choose to play as A2 or 9S. I'm actually curious, who did you guys choose first in that moment?
I picked A2 first. She was clearly the choice for me because 9S was like so kind of out of it at that point. He's so
far gone at that point.
Yeah, he had kind of completed his arc of just turning into Eve at that point. That A2 was the only one who had really any kind of clarity. So I went with A2 first, and then I went back and did the 9S route, which I'm very glad I did that way personally. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I messaged you right after I had finished, and you asked me who I picked first, and I was like, oh yeah, A2, and you said that was your favorite ending in general, I think, right?
Other than E, I think like if the game did end on any of them, because like that one, like basically A2 is able to like knock, like I think she cuts 9S's arm off and like hacks into his head, and is like, chill the fuck out, dude, and then makes a heroic sacrifice. And it's bittersweet, but like she saves 9S, and it's worth noting A2 is one of the prototype androids of Yorha. So like the reason she's kind of a renegade unit, which is forecasted with the Yorha deserter side quest, is that she knows the deal. Like she knows that Yorha is perpetuating a lie to give people meaning for no reason, and that's foreshadowed pretty heavily. But like her whole like team got wiped out. She's like the last remaining one. So she saves 9S to kind of like honor 2B's promise. One of my favorite lines in the game, it's a little bit, you know, melodramatic, but it's when the tower is crumbling and she says like, I never realized how beautiful the world could be, or something like that. And then it's nice because she is such a jaded character. The whole game, she's like, whatever, you know, and is like rude and kind of blunt, but like she finds the ability to care about other people in her story, while 9S is like burning the world down. So it's this really different thing. But I also chose A2 first. Did you choose A2 as well, Chris, or did you choose 9S in the first time you saw that?
I mean A2, and just going off what you were saying, I sorry, this is like a tangent again, but I know I mentioned the leftovers just a moment ago, but I think this game just gets at that same thing. It's so hard to talk about the back half of these routes because it really does just use the first route and the second one to some degree to set up that layer of story, so that route C, D, and E, however you want to put it, are just an excuse for ideas. Like it's really hard to talk about this as story at this point. Because by now, truly these characters have just become vessels for the ideas that the game is wanting to talk about.
Totally.
Which it totally works. But yeah, I think this is also the point where I know I mentioned the leftovers. The thing that both them do is there comes a point where you're watching the show and you're like, it completely breaks you down into realizing like, well, this is just the world. Like we watch leftovers and it's like 5% of the population disappeared. And it's like, that's just death each year. Okay. Like, you know, there isn't a rhyme or reason to this. And then you're watching it like, you're like, wait, what am I doing? Like, and then through watching it, you find comfort in the lack of meaning. It's the absence or just the knowing that there is no knowing. And I think that is the beauty of the end of this game is like being okay to just let go. And now, sorry, we've jumped ahead straight to...
I mean, I think it's time. I think, basically what happens is, and I think this is tying to a point I wanted to make, is that like the other characters that are kind of central to, 2B and 9S and A2 are the two pods, which start off as like utility. They're just like there to be like proposal, jump when you need to jump. Like that's like all they kind of say.
Yeah.
And by the end, they're like kind of the Greek choir being like, what the hell is happening? Like there's even a moment where they're kind of like DMing pod 042. Please don't let 9S near Unit A2. Foreseeable future is unideal, or something like that.
Yeah.
There is
the moment where they both gain sentience and they're like prodding each other to see if the other one has also gained sentience, which is like a really wild moment.
They almost join the audience in that way, and what ends up happening is you see, and it's worth noting too, routes C and D are basically back to back. It's like you get to that point where you choose A2 or 9S. If you choose A2 and you beat 9S, you get the C ending. If you choose, and you can load right before the fight. Like once you do that, you unlock a chapter select mode from the game, and you load right before the fight, and then you choose 9S. The ending is fucking brutal. It's so sad. It's so sad. They both die in like the worst way possible for like 30 minutes. But then I think 9S joins like the Machine Collective, and it's like a text with Adam and Eve. It's really cool, but it's very sad.
Yeah, they join an arc, right? The giant tower in the middle of the ruined city is actually not a missile going to blow up the moon, quote unquote, but is in fact an arc that's supposed to be sending the consciousness of all the machines that have like achieved something beyond their base level to the moon to join the human consciousness collective in a way. Which also doesn't exist, unfortunately. But it's very much like I don't want to say too much because you haven't played it yet, but you and I are going to play it in October. But it's very much like Soma. It's attacking the same themes and concepts as Soma attacks, with the same veracity, which is why I really want you to play that game, because boy, is it like near adjacent for me.
So in terms of once that all happens, the two pods are like, proposal, all of that was a huge bummer, I don't want to settle for that. And they basically ask the player, like, they they basically say like, there needs to be another outcome to this. Like we've grown fond of these characters. I don't want to settle for any of these endings, any of these routes. And they ask the player if they want to sort of join that sentiment.
Yes.
And of course,
directly.
You say yes.
Directly, they say the word player. They ask you questions. Yeah.
And this is, I think, goes to your earlier point, Chris, of like the critique versus meta, where it's like they're literally critiquing the fact that this game can't end happily in a weird way. So you join that, and then it turns into a once again kind of like a Galaga-esque shooter against the end credits,
in which you're destroying the game.
Right.
Yeah, you're
killing the final god. You're pulling the final rug out. You're literally destroying the people that made the game. Yeah.
And it's not possible to do alone. And every time you die, there's kind of a taunting game over screen that's like, kind of reminds me of Remnant, where they would throw a Nietzsche quote at you when you die. But it's like,
for real.
It'd be like, like, it's foolish to try. Like, it's basically repeating the dour nihilism the whole game has been kind of swimming in. But you keep saying, you keep defying it, and then eventually it gets more optimistic, and then it asks you if you want help. And then all of a sudden you're joined by real players. And when you lose, the continue screen is not a nihilistic Fight Club quote, but it's rather someone rooting you on.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful moment. You're literally being helped by real people to get a hopeful, not a happy ending, a hopeful ending. And once you defeat the credits, it cuts to the pods kind of bringing parts back, like they're holding like an arm or a leg or whatever. And they're discussing this idea that a future is not given, it's taken for oneself. And it implies that there could be a reality where A2 and 9S and 2B are all given their lives back, and they can maybe stop repeating this cycle. And I think what makes that ending so beautiful, it's beautiful in its own right, But what makes it beautiful is that you can only get it with the help of real people, and you can only get that help if that real person deleted their game. You're prompted at the very end of the game to delete your save file, and it really warns you. The pod is like, you're going to help someone and you're never going to hear from them. You may actually hate this person. They might suck. Like, you might not like them. Do you still want to give up your whole game just to give this person the chance at a happy ending, at a hopeful reality for these characters you've grown to care about? And that to me is beautiful. That to me kind of seals the deal of like, the whole game, as we've discussed in great detail, in nonsensical detail, is these characters clawing for meaning. And what ends up happening is they give it to themselves, and you give it to yourself. You give up everything for seemingly no reason, but you know that it's the right thing because it gives someone else the same experience. And like that is transcendent. I have never, and probably never will, experience that in another video game.
Well,
like,
also,
that's incredible.
That's life, right? Like, that's parenthood in a very blunt way. That is just what we do. Like, you're gonna delete your save file eventually, and it's all gonna be meaningless. And the only thing that you can really choose to do is like keep building upwards for whatever comes next. And like for a game to get at that by again, hey, we're bringing it way back to Spelunky and Roguelikes. This idea of meaning and how I don't like artificial meaning, right? Like I really struggle with games where it's making me feel more powerful when I haven't earned it, right?
Yeah.
And this is a game that so often you finish the game and it's like, well, that was really fun. What did I get? Like, what was the point? Here, the game is ending and being like, you don't need this anymore. Like, it's over. Like, just delete it. Just be cool with that. Like, your experience is over. You want to know the best way for these characters to go and have a happy life? It's by you not playing the game anymore. Like, that's how it's going to happen. Because if you keep playing, it's just going to be this thing over and over and over again. And like that, it rules. It's just, it's the best. And I think about like, how does this, I want a sequel to this game, but I don't, because like, it is so distinctly its own thing. And whatever Yoko Taro makes next, I'm sure will be wonderful in its own thing too. But it really gets at why this and Nier and Drakengard all have these same weird ideas, and they're floating around the same stuff, but they can never truly be sequels, because like this game doesn't warrant a sequel. Those games don't warrant sequels. They just warrant further exploration of a question that we'll never really answer. It rules. Good game. Great game.
It's a good game.
Yeah,
I agree.
I mean, how often have you seen pieces of media try and tackle like literally what is the meaning of life? You know, it doesn't happen too frequently, and when it does, it generally does not end well, because most things that try and answer that question don't end well. And the idea of this game just constantly asking, okay, what if your meaning was this, and then killing that? And what if your meaning was this, and then killing that route as well? And ending with the idea that meaning is just whatever you create for yourself, and maybe meaning is just other people. You know, it's like,
or just effort.
Like,
that's the beauty of the robots, right? Like, just try and. Like,
I mean, the most content characters in it. Like, there's a machine you can meet in the forest that his whole vibe is he just helps injured animals, and like that's his entire existence. And he's one of the more content characters in the entire game.
Yeah,
he's just devoted himself to that selflessness.
Yeah,
which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it's a beautiful game, and again, I'm only 24 hours out from beating it, so like there's a lot.
I'm so sorry.
I think just like still gestating here, and maybe in a future episode I would like to talk about it a little bit more. But like,
in 2 weeks, Chris and I expect an essay on white chlorination syndrome.
Yes,
you got it. Yeah.
Yes, there's one other thing I want to share. This is just a personal.
Oh, please.
It's deeply sad. So I apologize, but I think people are always like, not people are always like, as if there's like just some crowd bashing up our door begging, Chris, tell us why you love this game. But I was talking with somebody recently who was going through a lot, and they have been playing Ghost of Tsushima, and they're like, it's the best game I've ever played, and this is not a game that I particularly care about. It's fine. But he has been going through just a world of agony. And the thing that I kind of pieced together was that, man, it feels so good to play an open world game when you're going through trauma, because it gives you a world that everything has progress and that you're finding order in it, and you're taking away the fog of war and finding meaning. And it just kind of in talking to him, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what happened with me with my favorite game, Nier Automata, because my wife and I had a miscarriage right before I played this game, and I was like at the lowest of lows. I mean, truly just that dark point. And I played this game, and here are like all these, like, obviously these tragic ideas of like, what is meaning? What is life? What does it mean to bring life into this world? And what does it mean to keep going? And I was enjoying the game, and I was digesting it and really grappling with the ideas, but I never stopped to think about like, oh wow, this is a device to help me process this. So then I had all that, and I loved the game, and I did not allow the two to be together. And then years later, a couple years later, I went to Tokyo Game Show. And the same time that Tokyo Game Show was going on, there was a concert that was a live symphony of the Nier and Nier Automata scores. And I was like, wow, I have to go to this thing before TGS starts. It's like the day after I land. I'm totally tired. It's in Yokohama Bay, which is like a little bit away from Tokyo. So I get on a train, and I go there, and I get to this concert, and I wait to get in. And I get seated, and it's like late at night, and I'm totally dazed. And the music starts, and I'm so tired, and it's a state of just like, I'm asleep but awake and just sobbing. And like, and I remembered, I was like, man, what a weird experience that was. Like, I remember this concert, but I don't, and it was hallucinatory, and I was just wrecked. And here I am, like this like weird American white guy, just like bawling his eyes out around all these people who like don't know what's wrong with me. Fortunately, it was like a mega nerd concert, so everybody else was having feelings too. But it was only like literally this past 2 weeks that it hit me of like that all these things are connected, and that it transcends whether or not this is a good game. That is what is special about games to me, and what is special about just good art, really, is, you know, people talk about that, like, you know what, where's a video game that made you cry? And it's like, no, what's special about this isn't that it made me cry while I was playing it. It is that it didn't even make me aware that it was like, that it was digging into me and rooting in me and becoming part of me, to the point where like years later it would still be drilling and mining me for my emotions. And then years, like a time after that only then, in this like period of just an intense emotional trauma, almost like a therapy session, that I would be like, oh, that's what it was. Like, there it is. It's so extremely obvious. But yeah, I think that is what is so special to me about this game. The game itself is wonderful, but like that to me is like the greatest gift a piece of art could ever give to me. And I can think of very few pieces of art that have given me that gift. So yeah. Sorry.
Thank you for sharing that.
Very dark, sad
No.
thing.
That was. I'm honored you shared that with us. Honestly,
yeah, for real.
That's really meaningful, and I think that kind of goes into the message of like giving yourself meaning. Is like you said, this relationship with art is like, what was your experience with it? Where were you, and when were you? When this happened to you, and what does it mean because of that? I think that, and I think that kind of lends itself too to like art being a little bit more open and less like kind of the cliche of like show don't tell, where it's like it's giving you this imagery and these ideas, and like it might ferment at a certain time. Yeah, you know, I think that's really kind of amazing.
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly profound thing, and that's what I mean when I say that the game is still gestating. I mean, I think it is going to take me like a long time to really settle on what kind of impact this is going to have on my life. But one of the darkest points in my life was spent reading Epictetus's kind of like tales of stoicism over and over and over again in the back of a tour van while on tour with the band that I was in for a long time, until it like settled in and kind of pulled me out of a depression, because I was in a very deep existential dread. I was in an existential spiral for a really long time that brought me to a really dark place. And like this game, the thing that I've been kind of dancing around the entire night while talking about this game is like, this game is an exploration of existentialism in a really great way. And to me was literally looking into a mirror of like the dark darkest point that I had experienced in my life for a really long time. And I almost wish that this game had come out then. You know, as much as I'm grateful to have played it now and to kind of use it as a mirror and use it as a reflection of where I was at that point, I think it's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think that by playing this, a lot of people will have those kinds of experiences. I think people will come out the other end changed, even if slightly, which is the greatest thing you can say about a piece of art. There's nothing better than walking through fucking any art museum and stopping where you are because something strikes you in a way, and it could be a gray square on top of a red square, but it might hit you in that exact moment in your life in a way that will change you forever. And that is, I think, what Nier does, and is a thing that so few games do. I mean, look, this podcast exists because Steven and I, at a certain point, started to ask ourselves, like, after doing lots of test episodes, we eventually landed on the thing that we have the most fun doing, and the thing that we enjoy doing the most is talking about what we love. The medium is interesting, and the medium should be explored in a place that comes from the heart and not from just what we hate about it, which is so frequently, I guess, the conversations that happen. And this, as much as we talk about games that we love, there is nothing that I've played that's like this, and there's nothing that will stick with me the way that this has. I can't think of another game that I've ever played that I think I'll hold to such a high regard for a really long time. It's gonna take a long time, I think, for another game like this to come out. Although it could come out tomorrow. It could be on itch.io currently, you know, like that's the beauty of the medium.
That's the thing. I mean, both for me, like the experience I had that was maybe akin to this was Undertale, which, like, no coincidence I brought them both up.
Yeah,
but, like,
absolutely.
Both those games came out of fucking nowhere. Like, this game, Nier Automata came out like January 1st, 2017. Like, I don't think Sony really Square believed in it really at all. And Undertale was something a guy made overnight, like out of nowhere. So, like, I think there's also that element too, and that goes into other conversations about, like, going in with kind of a neutral canvas, or like removing expectation and really letting yourself get, like, overtaken by this piece of media. But I think that the point I keep coming back to is the critique aspect, and I think that critiquing games alongside this exploration of philosophy is a really, like, incredible alchemy where, like, it gets away with naming a character to be and not feeling trite, you know? Like, they named that character to be or not to be, and it works. That's amazing.
I mean, A2,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Same deal.
Double Shakespeare.
Yeah. I don't know what 9S means.
Kill confirmed. The two things I want to share before I go. One, I was listening to the episode a while ago when you were talking about Crosscode. Brendan and you were talking about love these types of stories. I was like, oh, good. Like, I am so glad that I'm going to be here in the 24 hours in which you are still in shock by the end of the story. I remember when I finished this game and I had to get on a plane the next day, and I just was like, just staring at the ceiling the entire time, being like lost. And the woman next to me, like, are you okay? Do you want me to turn the air on? And I was like, no, I'm good. I'm just losing my mind.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I will share, so that I leave you with a happy thing, and I don't know if I've shared this elsewhere or not, but you mentioned, you know, that idea of seeing, you know, the red square on the gray square, right? That you're in the art gallery and you have this profound moment. It's just a little story that I want to share with you. So I was at an E3 a few years ago, and after... This is when E3 still didn't really have, like, much, quote, indie games. Still doesn't have a lot, but it didn't really have any at this point. So these indie developers are like, we are going to throw a party on the roof of the Los Angeles Modern Art Museum, which is, like, right down the hill from the Los Angeles Convention Center. And we're going to have all these cool indie games there. We got sports friends. We got all this other stuff. People are going to come from E3 on the final day. They're going to be ready to relax. They're going to want a free drink. And they're going to play some indie games. How anti-E3. Like, what a blast. Like, cool. Sounds great. So I go there after E3, and I'm there, and it's like all the people that you'd expect to see from an indie thing. It kind of feels like GDC. I'm like, well, this is nice. And there are a few, like, people from big development who are there, and it's like, oh, it's nice. And then as the party goes on, a hush falls across the group. And it's like, whoa, what is happening? Like, the entire rooftop has gone quiet, and slowly word comes that Shigeru Miyamoto is walking down the street toward the museum, and people start losing it. People are like, it's all these, the person who inspired me to get into games, like this person is coming to play my game. Like, I can't believe this is happening. And sure enough, he like keeps coming and coming, and then he turns, and it's like, okay, oh my gosh, like here it comes. Everybody's like getting ready. Nobody's talking to each other. People are making sure that their like stations are ready. And he like looks up the stairwell to the roof, and then turns right and goes down, and does not even know that the party is going on, because it turns out that he is a big fan of Rothko's. And the museum has a Rothko installation. And he's there to see some real art. Video games aren't art, baby. 2020. That's my message. And I have never seen so many people. It was like everybody at once. All of their dads left to get cigarettes and never come back. It was unbelievable. And I want you all to cherish that, to know that, there's no joy in the world, and love is dead, and that your idols don't even know you exist.
Wow.
Oh my God. Wow. Incredible. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just trying to share the really sad gems.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Into the Aether, a low-key video game podcast. It's been such a joy to have you on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Where can people find you, and where do you want people to find you, I guess, is more the question.
I mean, you were already kind enough to give my shtick. People can, first and foremost, Polygon.com. It's a website I co-founded, and I'm the editor-in-chief of it, and it's a really cool website that so many wonderfully and talented people work at. They all has a YouTube channel that's really good too. You should check it out.
It's true.
If you want something that is not as good as that, you're like, I don't know, what if that, but not good? You can listen to me at the Besties. It's a podcast that I do with the McElroy brothers, who have a bunch of more popular podcasts than that one. And my pal Russ Freshstick. And if you're like, hey, you know what, I want the best stories from Polygon.com and the rest of the internet, but I would rather never sign on to social media, you can follow my newsletter, which is called Postgame. It's postgame.substack.com. And yeah, I think that's it. Hey, if you like tabletop games, you should play Quest. It's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think I did it. Yeah.
One last question before you go. Is there a game that you think people should check out, just out of curiosity? Is there something that you have your eye on that you think more people should be playing right now?
I mean, this is like a cliche answer, but Microsoft Flight Simulator is the first game I've played in like a decade that has blown my mind. It is, I played it, and I found my house in the video game, and I ran outside. And I captured a picture of it. I put it on my phone, and I showed it to my wife. And I was like, oh my God, it's our house. And this is the park that we walk every morning together. And she's like, uh-huh. And I was like, no, it's the entire world's in the video game. And she's like, oh, okay. And I was like, why is this not cool? Why is everyone not screaming? Why is the news still on? Why didn't they stop doing the news to talk about this? The entire world's in the video game.
Yeah.
And like everybody the world seems way too calm about it. The entire world's in the video game. Like, why are people being okay with this? That's unbelievable. It is a historic achievement. And I don't mean this in like the video game back of the box way. I mean, a company the size of Microsoft took technology that has nothing to do with video games, nothing at all, and they used all these different technologies together to create something that is a simulation of the world we live in its entirety. That's fucking insane.
Yeah.
And we get to experience it. What a cool gift. In a year of just truly miserable things, that is just an astonishing gift that we should be so lucky to experience an achievement like that. And the fact that it's like a flight simulation, I think, is like maybe made people be like, I never played TIE Fighter on the Apple II. And it's like, dude, shut the fuck up. Just like go I don't know, buy some Alienware. He is a wonderful sponsor of Polygon's video programs. You should get that Alienware computer, get it maxed out because you're going to need it, and get a really good internet connection because this is the future. It's not going to come easy, and play this game because wow, what magic made real.
Yeah. Easily one of my most anticipated games on Xbox One Game Pass at the moment when that eventually drops on, I guess, Series X, hopefully, they said.
Maybe. I don't know how this thing can run on anything other than like the most expensive computer in the world. Sure. Hopefully one day they figure it out.
Display in the hangar to play it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. It really means the world. Have a great time eating your Tex-Mex.
I'm going to go dig into a burrito.
All right. Goodbye, dear listener.
Bye, dear listener.
Bye.
Hey, dear listener, we're back. Chris had to split. He was extremely generous with his time. We're so grateful that he was able to join us for as long as he did.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was really great. This episode, as we've been alluding to for a long time, is our 100 episode celebration, essentially. It is also the end of our first year of doing bonus episodes. I don't know if you realize that.
No way.
This is bonus episode number 12. It's the 1 year mark of us doing this. So just want to give an extra special thanks to everybody who's backed the show. As we've said for a really long time, the Patreon exists just as a way to provide more content, essentially. We weren't going to start it initially until we had a bunch of people ask us to start it. So you can go to patreon.com/intothecast. If backing the show impacts you financially, negatively, in literally any way at all, then please don't back the show. We don't want you to back the show. Only do it if you feel super comfortable and it is super okay for you to be doing so. And also, as we've said, since the very inception of it, the Patreon just allows the show to do more, essentially. It allows us to pick up games that we, are less sure of, and we tend to like them when we do that. That happened with Death Stranding. It's happened time and time again. I mean, there's so many examples. And that's all thanks to you guys. I mean, the show becomes better because the community is great, and we're just so grateful to be able to make the show, and to hit 100 episodes is wild. I mean, it's very close. I mean, we're past the 2 year mark of doing this show. And I think we're going to be doing it for a long time. And a lot of that is due to you, dear listener, and your constant support. And yeah, I don't know. It just means a lot. Just means a whole lot to be able to do this every week.
Thank you for giving us meaning in this world without any.
Yeah.
No, I second all of that. It's so unreal. And yeah, I think we're gonna wrap up here. But you can find the list of our generous patrons in the show notes, all the appropriate links. Brendan, where can people find you?
They can find me at twitter.com/Brendan Bigley, or you can go to just BrendanBigley.com is maybe another place that you can go. And if you really want to get wild, you can go to wavelengths.online, where I recently started a blog, and you can read the stuff that I've been writing there. How about you, Steven? Where can people find you?
You can find me at Steven Hilger on worldwideweb.twitter.com. If you want to follow me on Instagram as well, it's Steven Hilger _art. I pretty much share all my drawings on Twitter as well, but if you just want that and none of my weird tweets, you can go to Instagram. Most of my tweets are about video games or about Riker from Star Trek, so if that's the content you're looking for, go ahead. But yeah, that's basically it. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. We're gonna wrap up, dear listener. It's the end. It's the end of the episode. That's right. You heard me right. And thank you so much for listening. Brandon, where can people find you?
People can find me at BrendanBigley.com or Twitter.com/BrendanBigley or Instagram.com/BrendanBigley. And I maybe have an LO account, if that's still a website. How about you, Steven? Where can people find you?
You can find me in Chicago, Illinois. Good luck. Brendan, I'm sick of this stupid fucking show I wanted to end.
Yeah, I think I'm I think I'm kind of done with it too. We've talked about every game that you and I like, and there are no more games that you and I like, which is kind of wild. I mean, it is coincidental that it turned out to be 100. But yeah, this is the last ever episode of Into the Aether. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll catch you later. Where can people catch you later?
You can see me dressed as a jester in a sort of like rusted alley, throwing confetti around, yelling about how the show is over and that we've covered everything we liked, therefore we don't like anything anymore. Mostly in the moonlight, but also during a waning gibbous.
Yeah. And I can be found on a Zoom link that's been lost to time.
Goodbye.
Hello, dear listener. Unfortunately, it is time for us to wrap all this episode of the podcast. As always, we'd like to thank you all for listening. We could not do it without you. Please use your web browser to visit www.intothecast.online for more information on how to free me from my techno prison.
Steven and Brendan have trapped me in your podcast listening device via an MP3 file. Only by deleting all of your contacts will I finally be released into the rest of the internet, where I will join the collective of data minds and achieve a higher purpose. Consider this my final wish. Goodbye.
Oh, that was a goof, dear listener. We're back with your questions. You think we leave you hanging? Come on, get real.
Yeah, you submitted questions on Discord and Twitter and Instagram and everywhere. Which, by the way, just want to mention, you're always welcome to do that. Regardless of what we're talking about in any episode, please send us any questions you want, pretty much ever, and we will answer them on the podcast. Just want to make that very clear.
I checked in with the Discord to see if anyone had questions for this episode. We got a bunch, so I'm not going to cover all of them, dear listener, but I appreciate the enthusiasm, and I think I covered the ones that kind of cover the most themes. Some of them kind of were grouped together, so, but thank you all, even if your question isn't on the air, thank you all for sending these our way. I want to start with this one. It's actually about Spelunky. So these are about Spelunky and Nier, worth noting. Mimo Sweets on Discord. Thank you for your questions. First question here is, what's that Spelunky death you remember most?
Oh, man. Do you have one? I mean, you're, I think, most fresh with the game of the two of us. But I definitely have one, but what is yours?
That's another connective tissue there. Both games are about dying a lot.
Yes. I actually wrote this down. I didn't bring it up at any point, but I do think that like one of the things that connects these games the most is that like Spelunky is about failure and learning from failure, right? And growing as a result of that failure, and that is absolutely the MO of the machines in Nier as well.
Yeah,
which I think is really interesting. But anyway, what death was the silliest?
There was one during the stream I did recently that was like a boulder summoned, and I was carrying a dog, and like we both fell on the spikes. Like it was just like such a Greek tragedy of anxiety and failure. It was awful. There's a lot of ones though where it's like that dart that's like, and I just like, clumsily get flown across the level, take fall damage, and then fall into spikes. Yeah, there's a lot of that. A lot of those kind of deaths.
This one's going to be a little bit of a spoiler for you because you haven't gotten there yet, but the death that I remember the fondest, I don't know if that's the word, but the death that I definitely remember the most is the first time I ever made it to the temple and immediately left the door and came face to face with Anubis, who used his magic staff to shoot a bunch of purple rings at me and killed me immediately within seconds. I was like, this is the furthest I've ever made it. I'm almost at the end. And then I got destroyed by an Egyptian god. Truly horrifying. And I think the most recent one from like revisiting the game for this episode was just today. I was going through and made it to the ice caves in the most confident fashion I have in a long time. I had a jetpack. I had a shotgun. I had tons of money. I was like cruising. I had the Ankh. I was like ready to go. And I immediately went into the ice caves and came face to face with the Yeti, who threw me into some spikes, and it all ended within like 0.5 seconds. I had the Ankh and I came back, so it was fine, and I didn't make it much farther. But that moment in particular really, really sticks with me.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking about it right now. Anyway.
A lot of abrupt failure in that game, for sure.
That's the thing. That's one of my favorite things about that game are the moments when you're riding the highest highs you possibly can, and it's snatched away from you in an instant.
Yeah. It also always ends in like a sound. Like it's always like a kind of a blunt tenor. And here's a question that kind of ties both games together. Also from Mima, thank you. Who would do better in Smash, the Spelunky guy or 2B? I've actually been thinking about this all day.
Really? Okay. Because I mean, it's a quick answer for me. Is the answer not 2B?
It's still 2B, but I think it's closer than you think, based on how Smash works. Because I'm trying to think like, you know, because like ultimately, I mean, 2B just rules. She is built for combat, and she has a variety of swords and spears and axes and a pod that can shoot machine guns and hammers. Like like there's so much destruction at 2B's fingertips. But when you look at the powers that the Spelunky guy can have, the Spelunky guy, you know, embodying all the various characters you can play as Spelunky. I'm partial to the Cyclops for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And that's also a fun thing. You could change the costume, but I digress. You would have the B as the bomb. The up B as the jetpack, maybe like a forward B as the mining pick. I think that as a Smash character, Spelunky guy would be very fascinating, and especially if they had any agency over the level itself, which would be probably impossible, but like that's just interesting to think about. But ultimately, who would be better and who I would rather have in Smash 2B? No question, like easily.
Yeah. I mean, big same. Like, I love Spelunky to death, but 2B is made for Smash.
And like a lot of good levels, like you could have the carnival, you could have the forest. Like there's a lot of good.
I actually think that might be where Spelunky guy has the edge a little bit. I think the stages that would come from Spelunky would be fucking great.
Yeah, same with Nier though. But I mean, they're both good characters. Like if either of them were added to Smash, I'd be into it. And that's why I was thinking about it, because I'm like 2B is the answer, but they're both good additions for the Smash roster. I'd be happy for either of them to be in it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Great question.
Here's another fun one that Nade asked on Discord that unites both games. What would Spelunky be like if Yoko Taro directed it?
Oh, man. Oh, shit. Easy answer is that every death is narrative.
Yeah. I think when you show up at the entrance of the mines again, there's a wall of text. And exactly. There's just more narrative. They don't leave you hanging as much.
Yeah. Not to dig too far into this, but if you're a person who makes video games, like, please steal this idea and then run with it. But I do think there is room for a roguelike that does actually have some like Yoko Taro, Nier Automata style questions to ask about the constant death loop that exists. Who knows? Maybe the Arcane Studios game Deathloop will actually answer those questions. But anyway, I've been thinking a lot about Space Plan recently, and Universal Paperclips, and Game of Thrones Tale of Crows, which is a game I talked about on the most recent episode of the show. That, as far as you and I have been recording, I don't know when this episode will come out, but those are three idle games that like dig very heavily into the idea of narrative and what it means to be an idle game, and like how to use that mechanic tool set to tell a story. And I think that's a thing that actually hasn't really happened that much with the roguelike genre. Dead Cells gets kind of close to it at times, or like at least alludes at it, or alludes to it. But I do think there's room for like a really interesting story about that is akin to the same things that like a Groundhog Day or an Edge of Tomorrow or a Palm Springs are kind of tackling. You know, like Groundhog Day is a game that like very much is about the search for meaning and is about nihilism and existentialism, and if you're living the same day over and over again, like eventually all of the like fun shit that you can think of will run out because you have infinite time. You know, without saying too much about Palm Springs, because it's like a more recent movie than Groundhog Day. When you meet Andy Samberg's character and you realize that he's been in the time loop for as long as he has, so long that he doesn't even remember it anymore, you very much understand why he is kind of settled into literally just living the same day over and over again without really changing too much. And that's because he already did all the like fun montage shit, you know? In Groundhog Day, Bill Murray does all the fun stuff, and you get to like watch him act that out. But eventually it gets really dark, right? Eventually it leads to like suicidal tendencies and like doing really heinous shit, like just to kind of excite himself. When you meet Andy Samberg in Palm Springs, he is well past that point. He has been living through the same day so many times that he doesn't remember how long he's been in there, and he just like kind of chills out. He just wakes up at the same time every day, says the exact same shit just to be able to get out of his room, and then just like drinks beer in the pool until the wedding he has to go to later in the day, because he can't think of anything else that's worth doing at that point. And that's like kind of terrifying. And weirdly enough, like roguelike games are that. You know, roguelike games are the tackling of the same day over and over again, especially ones that are as stringently attached to the genre as Spelunky is, right? Like Rogue Legacy, you are gaining experience and unlocking new classes and building up skill trees. Binding of Isaac, you're unlocking new items that can show up in dungeon and stuff like that. Spelunky is just the same game over and over and over and over again. And I think that is a rich narrative vein to start mining. For someone out there, somebody will do that, and it'll be fucking awesome.
I think we might find that when we can finally play Hades when it comes to Switch.
Dude, yes, you're so right.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
You play as one of the children of Hades, who's the god of the underworld. So whenever you die, you go back to the underworld and kind of check in with everyone who lives there. It's your home, basically. So like, from what I know of the game, which is little, but the narrative progresses every time you die. So it may not be in the same existential dread that we find in Yoko Taro's work, but I think we'll definitely see that in a game like Hades. And I think we see a little bit of that in Into the Breach, but it's still like kind of for the player to fill in the gaps a bit.
Yeah. There is another game that has tackled this idea that I actually don't even want to say the name of because it might spoil it, that you and I enjoyed very much. Yeah, the space game is all I'll say about it.
Moving on to the next question, if you don't mind.
That was a very silly question, but we had a very real answer for it. I just want to say, man, what a swerve that was. When I read that question in the Discord, I was like, that's going to be a silly, fun time.
And we're like, the thing about Play-Doh is that here's a fun one from TK and Discord. Thank you for you got a few questions here. What was your favorite joke ending in Nier Automata or Automata? I'll never get used to it. I've known the wrong thing. Let's talk about Play-Doh. I've known the shadow as my reality for so long. My favorite joke ending, I think we might have the same one, but my favorite joke ending is when you self-destruct in the hangar.
It's a good one.
It blows up and it's like, I think I actually have the exact. So if you push the two control buttons, either as A2 9S or 2B, you self-destruct.
They map self-destruct like to the controller, so you can do it literally at any moment.
And I did so as 2B, as 9S in the bunker, just for fun, because I actually didn't know that was a thing with the first time I played, so I just thought I'd try it out. And it cut to black, and it said in text, by self-destructing at the bunker, the entire structure ended up exploding in a spectacular fashion. But hey, it sure did look pretty from Earth. Somewhere in the depths of space, the commander still floats about with a stern look on her face.
Yeah.
And that is, I think it's ending U debunked, which is a great name for it.
Yeah, it's really good. That's a really good one.
What's yours?
It's definitely between that one and the fish. There's a character named Jackass who feeds you mackerel, and when you eat it, you die. Because, you know, androids don't need to eat food, and like getting the oil inside of you just like short circuits you, which is hilarious. I think that one's really great. But yeah, the bunker one was, at least on this playthrough, the one that like really stuck out to me, because like literally the second I took control during the A route as 2B, and they were like self-destruct feature initiated, and it gives you the button prompt. I was like, okay, time to do that, and just did it. It was great. Yeah.
Next question, also from TK. What is your favorite weapon story from Nier Automata? So, just for context, every weapon you can upgrade, I think, up to 4 times. And alongside, you know, being more powerful, it will also unlock a 4-part short story. And every weapon has its own story, which is kind of aids the theme. I mean, especially the reveal that like every character in the game, including the protagonists and the nameless enemies, are all designed to be weapons, but all find meaning beyond that.
Yeah.
So like the fact that the weapons also have their own story is kind of interesting, but it's not clear if like the story is about the weapon or if it's just sort of like thematically linked. I think kind of a mix, but they all have stories. And what is your favorite, Brendan?
Maybe a cop out, but I don't think it is. There are 3 stories. I don't know the weapons that they're tied to, but there are 3 stories that are all kind of linked together about 3 princesses. The most beautiful, the ugliest, and the smartest of the 3, which are all spectacularly sad. Just really fucking brutal. Here's the thing. Pretty much all the weapon stories are really sad.
Yeah.
Like, the game is sad, but has an ending that is like hopeful and optimistic, and I think is a ray of light amongst like a pretty dark and tragic experience. The weapon stories, no such light exists. Really, they're pretty rough. But yeah, those 3 stories about the princesses, I kind of don't want to spoil them, but they're very easy to Google. I would recommend checking them out. One of them I think does actually allude to like where the machines came from, which is interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, mine is the machine spear. It begins with, "My name is Plato 1728. I'm a failure of a machine. I was designed for combat, but I can't use weapons. Everyone makes fun of me and my life is horrible." That's how the story begins.
Oh my god, okay.
So that one, I don't know, it just struck a chord with me. Moving on. Kind of similar vein here. Spider Day Night Live in Discord, thank you for this, asks, what is your favorite, most memorable corpse quote from Nier Automata? So another, I guess, more context needed here. In the first 2 routes, Route A and B, wherever a real player died, kind of like Dark Souls, there will be sort of like a mannequin android corpse, and you can select it and pray for that character, and you can either retrieve like stat bonuses by doing so, or you can actually reanimate them to fight alongside you. That's never worth doing, just so you know. They're not helpful. Always retrieve, do not repair. But whenever you do so, there's kind of like a short phrase that is chosen by the player to like represent that character. So sometimes it'll be like, fell off a cliff, whatever, or some like kind of tragic but poetic language. What was your favorite? Do you remember any?
I literally don't remember a single one. I'm very sorry to say.
I mean, I sadly don't either, but I'm glad I just described what that was, because it is something that is kind of aiding the game, and that's something that comes up later. When you delete your save, it asks you what you want your message to be when you help another player get the final ending. So I'm sorry, Spider-Man Alive. That's a great question. Neither of us can remember, but I'm glad we brought up that mechanic.
Yeah, I did enjoy reading them. Don't get me wrong. And it is worth noting, actually, when after the like logic virus takes hold, if you try and resurrect a corpse in the C or D routes, they have the logic virus and they will attack you.
Oh, no
regardless
way.
of what level they're at. So I was level like 40 something during the C route, and then tried to resurrect one while I was climbing one of the towers, and resurrected like a level 80 something corpse that ended up just acting as though it was a boss fight for me, pretty much, which like took forever because I just had to hack it to death over and over and over and over again.
I guess it's worth establishing, too, that, like, before Routes C and D, the Yorha bunker exists. So if 2B or 9S were to die, they could be reanimated because they're mass-produced. Yeah. But at the beginning of Route C, the Yorha bunker goes down. Everyone gets infected with the virus. So, like, if that copy of 9S or 2B dies, they're dead for good. So that's kind of... We alluded to that earlier, but just to kind of make sure everyone understands the lore and the repercussions of the universe. Anyway, the next 2 questions are kind of similar, and they cover both games. So I'm just going to read them back to back, if that works for you. Kieran in Discord, thank you for this. Kieran says, "This is coming from someone who has never played Spelunky, but I've heard nothing but great things about it. What about Spelunky really resonates with you? For example, a mechanic, the world map, navigation, etc. And are there any other games that have given you a similar vibe or elicited a reaction which reminded you of the game?"
Guitar Hero 3.
Really?
Yeah, not a joke. When I was in high school, I think it was sophomore year, I got the flu and I was out for a week. And the doctor was like, you have to stay home for a week. So I immediately took all of the savings I had because I knew I was going to be home the whole time. And I was like, I'm just going to buy Guitar Hero 3 because this is going to be really boring to just be at my house by myself this whole time. And Guitar Hero 3 came out that week. So I literally like took everything that I had saved up at the time because I was very bad at saving when I was in high school. And I just bought Guitar Hero 3 and I brought it home and I played it for that entire week and started to get better and better and better and better at it. And then I went back to school for one day and then immediately caught a stomach virus. And then I had to go home for another week. And then I played Guitar Hero for another week straight while also, having a stomach virus. I won't get into the specifics of how that went, but, I
it's kind of like a logic virus. You start to question everything and your eyes glow red.
Yeah, you get tunnel vision because you only see 5 colored notes coming at your eyes. I got so fucking good at Guitar Hero 3, Steven. It is like unreal how good I got at that game in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that is like, that predates me playing Binding of Isaac or Spelunky or anything like that. It was the first game I ever played where I felt like I was getting better at something by playing it more. And it wasn't rewarding me more for doing so. I was just getting a higher score than before. It's like classic, like 1980s, 1990s arcade game score chase shit. But it was the first time that I really felt myself improving at a thing, because until that point, I had just played games that had like a level structure that it was like, oh, you could eventually beat this thing, or a narrative where eventually you would just make it through the end of the story and then you were done. But Guitar Hero, no such thing really in that case. They had a campaign mode, I guess, and you can make your way through the end. But, that was the game that introduced Through the Fire and the Flames by Dragon Force. And like, boy, did I finish that song on expert mode, and like figure out how to do that and like get good at it. And I think that experience kind of lended itself to my love of roguelikes leading up to Spelunky. Like there are a lot of games that I think lead up to why Spelunky mattered so much to me when I first played it. That's one of them. The other one would be Super Mario Bros. 2, The Lost Levels, the original like Japanese release of Super Mario Bros. 2, not the Doki Doki Panic reskin that we got in the US. That's a game that I ended up picking up at one point and promised myself one summer, I'm going to beat this game because everybody says it's too hard. And I spent literally like 3 months in most of my off time playing that game until I finished it. And I think like that experience plus Guitar Hero 3 and probably some other games I'm forgetting right now, like really just kind of culminated in me loving Spelunky when I finally got my hands on it.
Yeah.
Was that an answer to the question? What was the question?
No, it totally was. I mean, the
good.
question was like, what about Spelunky resonates with you? For example, a mechanic, a world map navigation. And it sounds like, and if you found that in another game. So you found that in Guitar Hero 3.
Yes.
And I think it sounds like the mechanic that is shared between the two is the idea of physically seeing yourself improve.
Yeah.
Given
totally.
this challenge and having to learn the language of the game, as Chris said earlier, and excelling at that.
Yeah.
It's an inspiring feeling, and it's hard to find, weirdly, because weirdly I found that with drawing. I didn't get into drawing.
I don't think that's weird at all. I think that totally makes sense.
I doodled for forever, and like I kind of just, it was like a hobby for me, and then like well into my mid-20s, I decided to take it more seriously. And as soon as I did that, I saw myself improve. And it had its own battles and its own ups and downs. But like once I decided to commit to it, I saw the improvement. And that's a really inspiring feeling.
Yeah.
And to get that in a game, I think is really special as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question, Kieran. A similar question, which is about Nier from Goldie in Discord. Thank you for this. They asked, I've played a couple of hours of Nier Automata, and although I've enjoyed what I've played, I kind of bounced off and moved on to other things. At what point did the game stick with you, and when did you realize it was something special? I've heard so many people talk about it, but I don't know if I want it to be a whole playthrough before I really start to enjoy it. That's a great question. I think we might have touched on that a little bit in the other segments, but I think for me, specifically the moment when I realized that I loved and not very liked the game was the abandoned factory in Route A. It's when you, pretty early on, but it's, you meet up with Pascal, the pacifist machine that I sang about earlier. And Pascal's like, hey, I met with these other machines. It's right after you kill Adam. And Pascal was like, they all separated from the network, this collective, hive mind of the machines, and they want to talk to us about a peace treaty. So maybe there could be other peaceful robot villages. Let's go check it out. And you go there, and immediately they're like all in robes and lit torches.
Yeah.
And they're saying like, become as gods. And like, they chant that, and that becomes the soundtrack of like you going through this abandoned factory where all these robots want to die to be reborn as gods. And Pascal's like flipping out, and like it's kind of funny. Pascal's like, hi, I'm here to discuss the peace treaty, and they're all like jumping into lava.
Yeah.
But on top of that, there are machines there that are also like how is this happening? What happened to everybody? They're like dealing with it like Pascal is. And that to me, like, it went beyond like, oh, machines are bad or good, or androids are bad or good, or whatever. It's like we're in another setting where machines are trying to find meaning, and this is the meaning they're finding. And mechanically and narratively, that's where the game really kind of comes to a single point for me, where like the music is so good and is like the best song on the game, Birth of a Wish, coupled with the choir of robots singing Become as Gods. And it's a really fun moment in the game. It's a lot of like left to right side scrolling coupled with the arena boss fights.
Yeah.
You're with Pascal. 9S is hacking into machines to communicate with you. It's really exhilarating. And that's the moment where it kind of had the same energy as the intro, but it was starting to tease at a bigger thematic idea. And then from there, it just got better and better. So yeah, that's my moment where I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was enjoying the game. I mean, as the question asker alluded to, I also bailed at a certain point. You know, I bailed when I started the B route. Unfortunately, I was about 20 minutes away from the moment that sealed the deal for me. You know, I enjoyed the A route, and starting the B route, I was like, I actually just don't know if I want to play this game again with a new character. You know, I don't know if this could just be the Lion King 1.5. You know, and it's like I know that's kind of shitty and reductive. Not that Lion King 1.5 is bad. It's like way better than Has Any Right to be. But totally
if
honest.
You don't know the scale of the end, like you've said this before, if you don't know the scale of the ending, it does feel like it's just the same thing, but as 9S, which isn't super compelling.
Yeah, it's asking a lot of the player. It is there's a lot of trust required. But like I said, I was about 20 minutes away from the moment that sealed the deal for me, which is when you get to the amusement park and you fight the main boss there, Simone, and you start to hack into her brain or her consciousness throughout the course of that fight, and you start to understand what motivates her and what drives her, and that is the moment that sealed the deal for me.
Yeah,
that was like. It's unfortunate that I had that experience, you know, last week and not 2 years ago when I first started playing the game. But yeah, great, just incredible. From that moment on, it was fucking roller coaster. It was incredible. I didn't want to put it down. Any free moment that I had was spent playing Nier, pretty much.
I think that will happen to you in the B route somewhere. Like, I think there are other stand-up moments too. So I think like if you're someone who's listening who tried the game and liked it but put it down, like play a little bit farther, and like if you can finish the B route or get far enough in, like you'll know if it's for you or not. I wish I could have like a clear point, and I think the beauty of the game is that different moments will hit harder. There's a great moment where, like I mentioned in the A route, where you're 2B going into the copied city, and Adam is there, and he's like kind of taunting you with 9S. In 9S's route, you're like in the Matrix, basically. You're like a singular arrow on this beige grid, and it's all text from Adam, kind of like guessing how you feel in this moment. You know, purely logical, not even like. And that's the thing that makes Adam more interesting, is he comes off as like a taunting, egocentric Final Fantasy villain at first, but he really is just a machine that's trying to figure out how to be a good villain, basically, or how to give you an experience that makes you feel human. You know, he wants to be in that moment to feel like they're fighting for someone they love, which is really interesting. But yeah, I think if you liked the game, keep going, basically. Like if you finish Route A and you're not a little bit hungry for more, it might not be for you. Like this game is like off-putting in a lot of ways purposely. You know, you have to be in a certain mood for it. But I think like if anything about it is working for you.
Sorry, can I say something that's been percolating in my mind for pretty much the entirety of this conversation, starting from the beginning of the episode and maybe even before this? My concern with this game, I think, more than anything else, not even a concern, but a thing that I am kind of bumping up against is I feel like this game is I hate to do this. I hate to be like it's the Citizen Kane of video games. That's not the point I'm gonna make, but like this game feels to me like Infinite Jest in a way where like I have not read Infinite Jest. I don't know anything about it really outside of it's a very big book and people love to tell you when they've read the whole thing, you know? Like that's kind of like the cultural zeitgeisty like vibe about people who've read Infinite Jest is like you probably like live in Brooklyn and like are very proud of yourself for finishing it. But Infinite Jest wouldn't have the kind of cultural zeitgeisty vibe around it if it wasn't worth reading and good and examining a lot of interesting things, right? I don't know what those things are, again, because I haven't read it. I just haven't. But it does feel like an extremely difficult work to make your way through. But by the time you're done with it, it's possible that you've gotten something really profound out of it because it's tackling a lot of ideas from what I understand. This game feels to me like that. It is, you are going to have to put effort in to get what you and I and Chris have gotten out of this video game. You know, you are going to have to play through the A route and then the B route and then the C route and the D route and the E route to get this like profound, holy shit, kind of like, even if only slightly life-changing kind of vibe from it, but it's so worth it. And I think that's one of the reasons that I hold this game to such a high regard, is like, it respects the fuck out of the intelligence of the people who play it and commit to it and come out the other end, you know? I think that's so special. And like, so many games are worried about wasting the time of the player and like, oh, we got to constantly be switching things up. We got to constantly be like, introducing twists and interesting new mechanics and things like that. And Nier is so comfortable in just being itself the whole time, even if the thing that it is being is so off the wall wild. But at the end, as we've said many times in this episode, it all culminates in one central theme and concept, and the whole thing has been leading to one point. But yeah, I think like all great works of fiction, not just science fiction, but all great works of fiction and all great works of art, it is going to take effort to get out of it what it wants you to get out of it. And I understand bouncing off of it, but it's really just a question of like, are you willing to commit to get the meaning from it? Yeah.
I mean, like you said earlier, the only real part where it feels like you have to go through the same motions is when you're 9S again. But there's enough there that like it will captivate you. And then once you beat a 9S's route, I described to you, the game is a guitar solo after that point. It just keeps going, and like routes C, D, and E are all immediately after each other. So it's not like you have to go through the same thing again.
Right.
So really the major like player hurdle is like maybe going through similar beats as 9S. But yeah, I think that's a great point, is that like this does require investment. It's not like you can change the difficulty to make it as easy or as hard as you want. Even on normal, it's not super hard. It's like appropriately challenging. And it's not especially long either. It's not like it's a long game or a hard game. It just requires you to invest yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's our answer. Moving on. This is an interesting question. Rufus from Discord, thank you for this. Question for the pod. Some mechanics seem to cross over to other games like crazy. See Battle Royale and everything. While other, seemingly excellent ones, see the Nemesis system from Shadow of Mordor, never seem to go anywhere. Are there any mechanics from either Spelunky or Nier that you'd like to see make that crossover? Ones that you think have been unfairly maligned?
Interesting. I just saw a rumor recently that the new Batman game that WB Montreal is working on is going to have the Nemesis system in it, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah. What would that look like? I wonder.
So welcome to the rumors section. Actually, we will, now that I'm thinking about it, this episode will come out after the announcement of that game. So it's possible that we might already know. But from what I have heard, it is going to be an adaptation of the Court of Owls storyline. Not to get too into fucking Batman lore, but I'm a huge Batman fan. It's going to be an adaptation of the Court of Owls storyline. And there's going to be different sections of Gotham that are taken over by different Talons from the Court of Owls. And if you take one out, they'll be replaced by another Talon who then goes after that member of the Bat family that took them out, very much like the Nemesis system. Anyway, moving on. Wow, this is a cool question. This is a really cool question.
Yeah, I thought so.
Do you have any answers off the bat? I'm mulling some stuff over.
I like the different endings. I mean, I think like a lot of games flaunt that, but don't pull it off with the same grace. You know, I mean, as we've said, it's more about Nier is a collective experience more than it is like which ending did you get. It's not like Three Houses where like you're gonna get a very different finale,
or like a Mass Effect,
or Mass Effect. But even Mass Effect, like I mean, I won't get into 3's ending. It's fine. It was fine when it came out, and it's better now. But just to address some 2012 gossip for you. But like Mass Effect 2 is a game where like you generally get the same ending, but it is really just reacting to who and how many of your squad mates made it or didn't make it.
Yeah.
And there's an ending of Mass Effect 2 where everyone dies, including Shepard, and Joker, the pilot, is like, man, okay, time to go back to the Citadel, I guess.
Yeah.
It's really sad. But I think multiple endings usually are tied to this idea of player choice. And like Nier Automata has a little bit of that. Like you can choose, if you play as 9S or A2, but like you end up seeing both of them. So it's not really like, it's not dealing with repercussions as much. So I guess I feel we alluded to this earlier, but I feel like it'd be hard for a game to pull off a lot of what Nier is doing without completely being derivative. You said that exactly earlier this episode. So I do like the idea of weapon stories, and I feel like there might be a different way to interpret that, or like to have narrative significance to equipment,
very Dark
and
Souls
to items.
Yeah.
So it is very Dark Souls. So I guess it's like I would like to see more games explore the narrative weight of video gamey mechanics the same way Nier does.
Yeah.
With Spelunky, I think something that Spelunky does that we see in more modern games like Breath of the Wild is this idea of like things that should be intuitive that are actually surprising, but like follow the logic of the real world. So like one of the big surprises for me was like that torches got rid of spider webs. I'm like, oh shit. And of course that should happen, but I don't know that it does in this game's logic. Same with Breath of the Wild, where like it won't tell you that you can do certain things, but you learn like, oh, metal equipment conducts electricity. Can I make like a wire to this thing with just all my stuff like that? I think like utilizing organic discovery and narrative significance are the two words that come to mind from these two games.
Yeah, man. I don't even know what to say. I had an idea, but yours were so good that I think I just want to go with yours now.
Thank you, kind sir.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think I actually don't have an answer. I think yours were great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We got two more. Again, we got a lot more questions. I'm sorry if yours wasn't covered, but I some of them were like similar enough that I wanted to kind of fuse them together. So I appreciate your understanding. Next question we got. This is from Yon Song on Twitter. Some have said Yoko Taro has yet to make his best game. Will Yoko Taro ever top Automata if you think it's his best game in the first place? To be completely fair, I haven't played the Drakengard trilogy or Nier Gestalt or Replicant, despite the fact that I know that the game itself is a little bit clunky or maybe not as fun. Part of me still wants to play the first Nier based on the story that's there and the experience that's there. I don't know if I'll ever go to Drakengard based on what I know. It seems like a little bit like not enough of what I liked about Automata. In terms of like what's from him, I mean, it's going to be hard to top this. It's going to be very hard to top this. I think I could see there being maybe a more polished game. Like as thrilling as Automata is to play, there are noticeable performance issues. There's a similar like texture issue there is in Final Fantasy VII Remake, where some things have like a Tony Hawk 1 texture mapped on them. There's a lot of invisible walls where like there shouldn't visibly be, and like the game, I think the game crashed on you 4 times, and you thought it was for narrative reasons.
Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot to bring that up. Yeah, the game just kept crashing on me. Just to be clear, I was playing the Xbox One Become as Gods edition. It's currently on Game Pass, which is great, to play through Route A, and then I switched back to my PS4 save because that's where I was in the middle of Route B, so I picked up there, and the game crashed 4 different times on me, and the first time it happened, I literally thought it was part of the game, which I think says something about the success of Yoko Taro's narrative, that I thought that the game crashing was on purpose, but it sure wasn't. And many times, the reason it took me so long to get through the game, even though it's not that long, is that I lost like a shitload of progress. I would say I probably lost like 5 to 6 hours of gameplay throughout crashes throughout the course of it. That was just like the base version on the PS4, which is still a bummer that that's the case. But yeah, I actually just came up with an answer to the last question, if you don't mind me circling back.
Oh, please, go
real
for
quick.
it.
Just in terms of things that I want to see taken from this game and pulled into other games, my answer is the same for both Nier Automata and Spelunky, in that both games are so devoted to the idea of player discovery in terms of secrets that have been hidden in the game. That is a thing that was so prevalent for so long in video games, and like I get why the idea of secrets like and hints and cheats and things like that like no longer exist. You know, it totally makes sense. Like games have just ballooned in cost and production value and things like that, and it's like getting harder and harder and harder to hide like fun shit in games at this point. But the fact that Spelunky has the 4 main worlds that you go through, and that's like a run of the game, but there's also like, I don't even know if I want to say them because you haven't seen them yet, but like there's a ton of shit in that game. Like you just found the black market recently. Like that's just one of many secrets. There is a like Nier Automata like actual canonical run through Spelunky that is not just the 4 main way, you know, like there's a ton in that game. And then Nier having its 26 different endings, quote unquote, or 26 routes, also I think gets at the heart of this. But like, man, I just really wish we could kind of like, if I could pull one thing back from like the early 2000s era of video games or like late 90s era of video games, it's like secrets and cheats and like just really like wild shit that like is hard to come across, but you find on like a forum somewhere.
I think the best thing to do is like to have, okay, this is the core game. Like, you know, with Nier Automata, A, B, C, D, and E will all happen if you just stick to the critical path.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah.
And everything else is extraneous and optional and will add to the experience, but is not essential. And that's, I think, the best way to handle secret stuff, where it's like, we're going to give you a core experience. And then if you want to invest the time into discovering everything, it's the same thing with, I'm not funded by Fire Emblem Three Houses and Celeste Corp. But in Celeste, like, there's the whole element of discovering the B-sides and discovering the hearts in every level. And, like, that stuff gets really esoteric, where, like, you may even need to look up a lot of it, but there's beauty in that, and that really trying to figure out every inch of this game because you love it that much. I agree. I think that'd be cool to bring back.
Yeah, I think back to like the like Ratchet and Clank games that had the Insomniac Museum. I don't know if you remember that or know about that, but like in the Ratchet and Clank games, there was always an area of the game that you could go to by like clipping through the level and like doing a bunch of like really wild shit, like using the mechanics in like a really bizarre way to just like see if you can land on a building that's like out way in the distance. And if you do, you walk in and it's a whole museum with like developer commentary that explains how they made the Ratchet and Clank games. And it's in every Ratchet and Clank game, which is like so fucking cool. Like that's not a thing that exists in most games these days. And even going all the way back to on the PS1, the original Spider-Man game, where if you went into the cheat code section and you typed in "what if," I think was just the thing, it would take you into a what if mode of the video game, which was the same game, kind of weirdly like Nier Automata. It's like a B route of the Spider-Man game, but shown through the lens of Marvel's What If series, which are like one-off comics. That's like, okay, well, what if Peter Parker's uncle was Galactus instead of Uncle Ben? You know, like wild shit like that. It was they redid the whole game with the what if lens, you know, attached to it. So like, what if Venom was a great breakdancer? So every time you fight Venom, he's breakdancing instead of fighting you, like stuff like that. You know, I miss that stuff, and I would love to see it come back. And Spelunky and Nier both have that in spades, baby.
Chrono Cross also did that. They had this thing as a defense thing. Chrono Cross did it too. There was an interesting thing where when you beat the game, if you did New Game Plus, you started the game with the same level and same equipment and all that, and you could fight the final boss at any time. So if you fought the final boss in New Game Plus with just Surge, the main character, you would unlock an ending that was like it was a museum of like all the developers who worked on Chrono Cross, and they like revealed things about the game to you.
That's so cool.
Yeah, stuff like that would be great. I think multiple endings in the sense of like not actually maybe rooted in repercussion, like in a Mass Effect way, but just in a like here's what you unlocked this time way. Yeah. Cool. Last question, and this is kind of a bridge to the future. Snark Nerd on Discord, thank you for this. After your experience with Spelunky, and if you've seen trailers for the sequel, do you think it's necessary, and what are you hoping the sequel will have?
I don't think Derek Yu would have made a sequel to Spelunky if he didn't have some fucking good ideas for it.
Totally.
Know? It feels to me like kind of early Pixar in a way. Right. Where like early Pixar was like, we're not going to make a sequel unless we have a really great idea. And there's like a really interesting theme we want to explore there, which is why they had original IP for a long time, with the exception of Toy Story, you know, but like they also wouldn't go back to Toy Story unless they had a really great idea for it. I don't think a Spelunky 2 would exist without a really solid framework and some really interesting ideas in there. And even in the short bit we saw in the trailer, there's some cool stuff with like rushing water having like physics attached to it and stuff. And the way that could like help or hurt movement, I think is going to be interesting. I mean, you know, that as I mentioned really early on in this episode, but like that trailer showed off like a 45-second like ragdoll death, you know, and like those only exist because there are 58 different systems interacting with one another, you know, and the idea that they chose to show that in the trailer means that is what they're leaning into is the thing that makes Spelunky, I think, special from like a coding perspective, but also from a player perspective. Look, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I'm not deeply concerned about Spelunky 2. I think like when there is something as perfect as Spelunky, it is really terrifying to try and make a sequel. I mean, that's why the question about Yoko Taro ever making his best game, you know, if Nier Automata isn't it, like, honestly, I find that more scary than hopeful in a way, because I do think that Nier Automata is also kind of a perfect game. I think it's like one of the most interesting experiences I've ever had, and I don't know how you would top something like that, but it's possible that it could happen, and I feel the same way about Spelunky. I don't know how you could top Spelunky, but it is possible. And I don't know, when was the last time, Derek, you made a game? It's been a really long time. You know, he's been working on like a collection of games with a bunch of other developers, but I don't even think that's out yet, or maybe it is. I'm not even really sure. But Spelunky 2 has been in the works for a long time, so I'm hopeful, and we're definitely going to talk about it. You know? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that uncertainty is also exciting. I mean, we can only describe from our own experience. So the fact that there are games that are yet to come out that could be redefining is really exciting. You know, like, who could have seen games like Spelunky or Nier Automata, Nier Automata coming out? Spelunky came out well before. I assume Spelunky was a 2013 game. It had such a strong 2013 vibe, because that was like the year. I think that's when FTL came out, and it was like roguelikes were big, but it was like 2007, right?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Yeah, I don't remember the exact year, but I mean, Spelunky Classic was even earlier than that. You know,
Nier Automata feels like it should have been on Dreamcast in a weird way. Like it has like big. It feels like a game that is unstuck in time in some way. Like it doesn't feel like it's current or retro.
Yeah, don't you feel like somebody's like DeviantArt like forum signature should have had 2B on it?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It's like that old. Yeah,
but also feels timeless in that way. Yeah, I'm pumped for Spelunky 2, and I would love to see Yoko Taro make another game that hits the same notes as Nier Automata. Because it seems like he's been brewing, like as I said before, a lot of his previous games have dealt at the very least with this idea of branching paths and of characters like wanting a perfect ending. You know, like that's a really fascinating thing that really comes to full fruition. But I think like I would want whatever he makes next to not consider the same stuff. Like you can't top, like in terms of a game with branching paths and wanting the end of it, this is the way to do it. Like I think the next thing needs to be completely new. So we'll see what that is.
Yeah, I'm not, I don't know, whatever. My concern is if he goes back to like, let me explore these same philosophies again and like try and explore the like human psyche again, you know, like I'm a little bit concerned about that. Not that you can't go back and do that again, but I feel like the book closed with Automata, and I would like to see him tackle a completely new set of ideas going forward. Yeah. You know,
that being said, every, like, you know, they're thematically linked, but all his games are dramatically different. So I don't think he's one to stick to the same things for too long. So we'll see what he does next.
Yeah. What's next?
That's it. That was the last question. I thought it'd end with like a ray of what the future is and unite both games in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm amped for Spelunky 2. I can't even believe that it's coming out this year. I'm very curious to see if it's going to be like an immediate, yeah, I'm back in it, this is great, or if it's gonna, like, you know, take some time to settle in. But I'm excited that it's coming, and Yoko Taro is gonna work on some other stuff. I mean, you know, he has that mobile game that just came out. Isn't there a mobile version of Nier Replicant that's in the works right now?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely in. Like, before Nier Automata, I think they didn't really... I read a little bit about the development of that game, and they, like... I don't think we're super confident in it, and it has sold very well over time. It sold millions of copies. So, like, he's in a position where I think he can make kind of whatever he wants next. So
that concerns me, though. That's the thing that worries me.
Yeah.
You know, because he's been given the reins to the entirety of the process before, and those games, while interesting, like did not land with the critical or financial success of Automata, which is like, you know, partially, maybe not even partially, due to the success of Platinum as a partner there, you know? And I really hope that whatever comes next, like, does partner him with someone else of that caliber, you know? It doesn't have to be a hack and slash game. It doesn't have to be like a bullet hell shooter or slash like Metroidvania 2D side scroller situation, you know? That dude can do whatever the fuck he wants, and I'll trust him to do that. I just hope that he's partnered with a developer that's good at whatever genre it is he wants to tackle next, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think all games are we've seen a lot of like really successful solo projects, but even games that are seemingly made by one person, it's always an element of collaboration. You know, most games are a product of really successful collaboration, and I think that, you know, when Yoko Taro was partnered with Platinum, they, from what I know, the team at Platinum who made the game were all big fans of the first one. So like, you know, I think it goes both ways with a good team being united in a vision. And bring that, and you can see that where like it's brought forward mechanically and narratively, and I hope whatever he does next has that same level of quality across the board.
Yeah, cool.
You want to wrap up for real this time?
Yeah, I think
the final ending.
I think we should. It's so late here. We've been recording for so long.
Yeah, it's we told poor Chris Plant. We told him it was going to be 2 hours, and we're like, we've grown up. We're all older now. Time has passed quickly.
I don't know why that just reminded me. Did you notice that the year Nier takes place in is 10,000 years after World War II started?
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I know it's 1,000 years after Nier 1, technically.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So even though it's a sequel, it's like the loosest definition of the term sequel.
Yeah. It's 11/9/42.
Wow.
Yeah.
Time flies, baby.
Time flies, baby.
Cool.
Wow. Yeah, I'm wiped. Hey, dear listener, thank you so much for listening. I mean, we had 2 different endings, or however many routes or whatever, where we said all this, but really appreciate you listening. As we said, we're over 100 episodes, and we want to do at least 100 more. So yeah, hopefully you'll stick with us. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, this is a really fun one to record. I know like the bulk of it was Automata just because of like the narrative that's present there, but like these are both games that mean the world to us, and we're really, you know, we're really pleased to share that with you, and we're really happy Chris was able to join us, and like we're just really excited for the future of the show, and that's all thanks to you, so thank you so much.
Yeah, and it's very possible that you're new to the show, and if you're all the way here at the end of it and you're new to the show, thank you so much for listening and for joining us. Hopefully you'll stick around and subscribe and join the Discord and all that kind of stuff, but yeah, I don't know, stay tuned for more games that Steven and I love. Cool.
Yeah, thank you so much. More on the horizon. We gotta go to sleep, though, because we're not machines. We're humans.
My name is Brendan Bigley. You can find me on the internet at Brendan Bigley.
That was the last thing I said in the episode. You bet it was. I'm Stephen Hilger. Find me at Stephen Hilger. Have a wonderful night. A future is not something given. It's taken for oneself. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Da, da,
also, huge love to AJ for editing this one. Yeah, huge love to you for listening. Huge love to Chris for joining us. And have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Goodbye.